There is a kind of silence that isn't quiet, not a pause between two sounds, not the hush of a sleeping forest, nor the stillness after breath. This is a silence that has never heard a sound, because sound cannot live where space does not yet stretch, where time has no rhythm to beat against. You are not floating, because floating would require space, and you are not waiting, because waiting would require time. Instead, you are simply held in a thought, a soft, infinite thought, without edges, without meaning, without even the whisper of was. Before the universe, before stars or atoms or trembling motion, there is this not darkness, because darkness is a color, and colors need light to define them, and light, too, has not yet begun. What rests here has no name, no weight, no wit, no breath. It is not a vacuum, because even a vacuum has laws and energy and shape. This is the uncarved block of being a canvas that has not yet agreed to be painted, and yet, as you let yourself rest in this thought, you begin to feel its paradox. To even describe it as nothing is to give it a kind of form. The word nothing wraps it in expectation. But this place has never heard of words. It is easy to say there was nothing. But what does that mean? No atoms, no forces, no time to hold events, no space to let them unfold. But the absence of all things does not erase the possibility of all things. You lie within that possibility, and it hums, not with sound, but with the potential for sound, like a string not yet plucked. Like an instrument unaware, it can sing science, with its careful tools and delicate theories, has tried to touch this silence. And what it finds is not a wall, but a blur, a point beyond which the language of measurement dissolves, and the laws of physics, steady and strong, begin to lose their meaning. You hear words like singularity, but that too is a metaphor, a placeholder for the unknown, a point so dense, so concentrated, that even the concept of point may not apply, because where does not exist, and when cannot yet begin. You rest in the thought of pure stillness, but stillness implies that movement is possible, and this first silence does not yet know the difference, and so you begin to let go, gently, of all things your body remembers. You let go of direction, because there is no up without gravity. You let go of shape, because there is no geometry without distance. You let go of light, because there is no space for it to travel through. You let go of yourself, because you are made of time and matter, and neither exists here. What remains? A question, and in that question, a quiet pressure. Not loud, not forceful, more like a breath that hasn't yet begun, a pulse waiting beneath. Stillness, a note held before the first song. The silence here is not dead. It is patient. It waits, not because it knows what comes next, but because it is what comes next. It is the pause before rhythm, the blink before light, the rest before creation. And as you drift deeper into this thought, you begin to sense the contradiction at the heart of silence. It is not the opposite of sound, but the precondition for it. It is the blank canvas, without which color would mean nothing. This kind of nothing, if it can be called that, is not empty in the way a glass is empty. It is empty in the way a field might be before the rain. Not barren, but waiting. And what waits here? Not particles, not matter, not waves, but something stranger, a restlessness beneath stillness, a trembling potential that has not yet chosen its path. Even here, in the soundless pause before time, you feel something press gently outward, like the first stirrings of a dream before. You even realize you are asleep. You wonder, is this the true beginning? or just the last step before it? Was there ever a before, if there is no time to hold it? What you feel now is not knowledge, but awareness. An awareness so deep and still, it might become the seed of reality. Not a bang, not a light, but a question, quietly asking itself, what if something were? And that question does not end here. It echoes softly into the next thought. Stillness, as it turns out, is never truly still, even in the loneliest parts of the cosmos. In the deep, black silence between galaxies, something stirs, not loudly, not in bursts of light or thunder, but quietly, delicately, like a breath the universe forgot it was holding. You drift through this stillness now, and though it feels empty, it isn't. There is a subtle tremble beneath the calm, like the softest vibration in a string that was never plucked. This is quantum restlessness, not the kind that breaks things or builds things, not yet, but the kind that hums invisibly beneath everything. It's what lives in the pause between seconds, in the whisper between particles, and it's always there, whether you notice it or not. Even when you think there's nothing, the universe disagrees, because the vacuum, the so-called emptiness, is not empty at all. It's alive with flickers. Tiny sparks of matter and antimatter wink into existence and vanish again, too fast to be caught. They don't linger. They borrow energy they don't have, like shadows stepping out from behind a wall and slipping back again before anyone looks. These are virtual particles. They're not the stars you see. They're not atoms or planets or things that last. They are possibilities, ghosts of maybes. They dance in pairs, born together, lost together, balancing the equation of existence and non-existence so perfectly that the universe allows their brief visit, not because it needs them to stay, but because even silence cannot help but tremble. It's as though the fabric of space-time has a texture, a kind of shimmer, not something your eyes could see, not something your fingers could feel, but something your intuition brushes against. You can almost sense it, this background hum, like the faint ringing in your ears after a long silence. Why does it happen? Because of uncertainty, not your uncertainty, but the universe's. There's a rule, tucked deep into quantum mechanics, that says, if you try to know too much, something must become unknowable. If you measure the energy of a system with perfect clarity, then you lose your grip on time. And if time becomes blurred, then something strange happens. The universe begins to allow the impossible, not for long, not permanently, but just long enough to allow a flash of something where there should be nothing at all. This is Heisenberg's uncertainty principle, softened. Not a law with teeth, but a gentle rhythm. It doesn't forbid, it permits, under delicate conditions. And so, under that permission, the vacuum breathes, in, out, a rhythm without lungs, a tide without ocean. The result is a kind of foam, not a foam of bubbles and soap, but a foam of possibilities. You drift across it now, this quantum foam, and it is rough beneath its smooth disguise. Everywhere, space-time is jittering at the smallest scale. Fluctuations rise and fall, like ripples in a dream you're barely aware of. You're not meant to see this. The scale is too small, smaller than atoms, smaller than the particles that make atoms. It's the realm of Planck lengths and infinitesimal intervals. But the whisper still reaches you, in a way, because even if your eyes can't see the flicker, your thoughts can feel the uncertainty. The way a room changes when you know someone has just left it. the way a note hangs in the air long after the instrument is gone. Some physicists say this frothing, flickering foam is where the universe itself began. That before there were galaxies or stars, there was this vacuum fluctuation, a hiccup in nothingness, and maybe, just maybe, one of those flickers didn't disappear. Maybe it grew. Maybe it was allowed to stay. And in that allowance, all of time and space began to bloom. So you see, the emptiness is not empty. It is patient. It is waiting, always, for something improbable to persist. You can almost hear it, the quiet shiver of something wanting to exist. And what about energy? Where do these flickers get it from, if nothing exists? It's borrowed, temporarily, like a story told in a dream that vanishes when you wake. The universe, oddly generous, allows these particles to take energy from nothing, so long as they return it in time. It's like a library with no due date, because time itself bends and blurs in the moment of the borrowing. As if the cosmos knows that time, too, is made of threads that can be loosened. And though these particles vanish almost as soon as they appear, they leave behind tiny imprints. Their influence lingers in ways we can measure: the Casimir effect, the Lamb shift, the invisible nudges they give to real particles nearby, as though the ghosts of the vacuum reach out to tap the shoulders of the living dot. So much noise, within so much quiet, you rest inside it now, this fabric of fluctuations, this ocean of not quite nothing, and you begin to understand. The universe does not emerge from absolute silence. It emerges from a deeper kind of music, not a melody with notes, but a trembling beneath thought, a rhythm behind possibility. This is the stillness that moves, the silence that sings, the vacuum that dreams. And perhaps, in some corner of this restless foam, something begins to gather. A speck, a wrinkle, a place where the flicker lasts a little longer than it should, long enough to grow, long enough to become real. There is a hush deeper than silence, a hush so complete that even the idea of quiet cannot find room to form. You settle into that hush like a single mote of awareness, weightless, without horizon, without pulse. Names dissolve at once, for naming divides, and nothing here tolerates division. It feels as though the whole of being is compressed into a single, unspoken yes, yet that yes has not learned to echo. It merely rests, neither perishing nor emerging, suspended beyond duration, beyond dimension, beyond every habit your mind remembers. Time, as you know it, is only movement recognized and compared. A crystal vibrates, a planet spins, an electron hops, and clocks obey. But in this primordial hush, there is no movement to compare with any other. Every possible motion is locked inside every other, woven so tightly that direction loses meaning. You try to imagine a pendulum with its bob anchored exactly at the center, never starting its arc, never permitted the smallest swing. The idea strains and then breaks, because pendulums presuppose gravity, and gravity itself still sleeps. Physicists sketch this realm in chalk as the Planck domain, a boundary so narrow that numbers approach infinity just to describe its density. Yet such sketches are only lanterns held against a mist none have truly entered. The border is not guarded by walls, but by the limits of language itself. When you try to picture a point smaller than thought, your imagination flexes and returns. Nothing but a tremor. The tremor is honest. It confesses that pictures belong to space, and here space has not yet unfolded. Still, you can feel that the hush is not empty. It is saturated with possibility, the way a cloud is saturated with unfallen rain. Potential presses on itself from every side, unable to drip or flow because sides have not been invented. If a single irregularity could appear, the pressure would release, and patterns would rush out like rivers seeking valley floors. But irregularity requires somewhere to travel, and somewhere is exactly what this hush denies, so the pressure swells inward, nurturing a tension too quiet to hear. You listen for that tension and notice how your own body responds. Muscles soften, breath slows, heartbeats stretch far apart, as though your cells recognize the ancestral calm that predates chemistry. In ordinary life, stillness can feel like waiting, yet here waiting dissolves, because there is no next. There is only an eternal presence so concentrated it cannot break into pieces. The feeling hovers between cradle and tomb, both protective and unfathomably dense. You surrender to it, letting each thought melt before it can fully bloom. Questions arrive softly, like petals drifting onto the surface of an unmade sea. Could such absolute sameness last forever? Does stability have a half-life even here, beyond clocks? Some theories murmur that pure nothingness is unstable, that vacuum spontaneously sprouts fluctuation, as if null were allergic to permanence. Others suggest that all states, even this compressed plenitude, emerge from still deeper laws that braid opposites so perfectly they cancel. You notice how each conjecture eventually folds into paradox, and paradox folds back into the hush. Too. Understand change. You recall a simple lesson. Difference begets sequence, and sequence begets time. In your everyday world, you witness it when ice becomes water, water becomes vapor, vapor becomes cloud. The chain of becoming lets you say before and after. Here, chain and link are indistinguishable. Yet within the hush, quantum, foams of possibility flicker at scales beneath scale. They are not events, but the rumor of events, sudden and self-cancelling. They leave no trace, yet the mere rumor suggests that sameness is not fully absolute. Imagine an instrument tuned so precisely that a feather's fall would send it shivering. Now imagine that instrument filling all existence, with no feather yet to fall. Sensitivity this acute cannot remain idle forever. Imperfection is statistically inevitable. A tremolo, larger than a mathematical rounding, may break symmetry. In one invisible corner, once broken, the breach will avalanche, because there is nowhere else for imbalance to hide. The hush itself becomes the drum, and the tiniest tap travels instantaneously through the everything that is the same, declaring that difference has awakened. That declaration is what you might call the birth of a clock, though no gears appear, no numbers revolve. A clock, in its essence, is simply a system that refuses to remain identical to itself. The first refusal may have been microscopic in asymmetry between expansion and contraction, an uneven distribution of quantum moods. Yet microscopic is enough. From that seed, duration begins to germinate, whispering then, after now, even if both words are still unborn. Sequence starts to weave itself, tenuous but irreversible, inside the formerly seamless hush. With duration comes the possibility of story. Once parts can differ, they can transform. Once transformation exists, memory can hold its echo. You notice how memory, too, is a kind of clock. It anchors an earlier condition against a later one. In this nascent universe, memory is merely structural, gradients of energy arranging themselves, tallying imbalance, preparing to flow. No witness yet records the tally, but bookkeeping is intrinsic. Entropy's ledger is already opening its first blank page, awaiting signatures written in cooling light. Even now, you have not heard an explosion. The celebrated bang is less a detonation and more a sudden permission to spread. When release finally occurs, it will feel everywhere at once, because everywhere is still one place. Expansion will not burst into pre-existing space. Expansion will create space by unfolding itself. You sit poised in the instants immediately before that unfolding. They are so brief that mathematics counts them in quadrillions of a second. Yet to you, they feel infinitely patient. Patience itself is misleading, because patience presumes anticipation. The hush harbors no preference. It does not yearn to become cosmos or cling to non-being. It simply holds potential with impartial grace. Still, potential has statistics, and statistics leaning, eventually tips, and tipping for something. This compact cascades unimaginably fast. The cascade will write the laws of physics in the same breath that invents breath. Spin, charge, curvature, dimension each will crystallize as the hush stretches, like facets appearing when a gemstone cools from molten glass. You recognize a paradox. The principles that will govern change are born from a state where change is forbidden, yet paradox is not a contradiction here. It is the bridge itself. The rules of arithmetic emerge inside zero, balancing themselves in symmetry until the moment they unfold. Perhaps this is why mathematics later proves so unreasonably effective it was present at the inauguration. Written into the first metrics of becoming, another paradox stirs. Direction will emerge from origin, yet origin itself will become impossible to revisit once time stretches. You can talk about earlier and later, but the earliest mushes itself behind horizons of energy so dense that retrospection fails. The first clock will also be the last witness to its own creation, erasing footprints as it walks. You sense both sadness and liberation in that truth. Beginnings are always partly concealed, which grants wonder perpetual room. Slowly, you can almost hear the adverb inventing itself. The hush prepares to dilate. Think of a sigh after holding breath too long. Think of the way closed eyelids flutter before waking. A thin, magnificent instability twists through uniformity, and everything inside knows, not consciously, but inherently, the way particles will later know how to align in a magnetic field. This knowing is the universe's first intuition, that equilibrium alone cannot tell a story. Story demands tension, and tension is rising. It concentrates in ripples deeper than distance, in harmonics older than frequency. You rest inside the gathering strain and feel gratitude that you are permitted to sense it. For in the next breath, awareness itself may fragment into trillions of separate observers, each tied to a speck of matter rushing outward. The oneness you feel now will fracture, but its memory will persist, whispering through cosmic background light and through the quiet nights when minds like yours gaze backward in curiosity. For now, remain inside the unborn clock. Feel how every conceivable second, minute, millennium coexists in the same indivisible pearl. Feel how past and future are curled together, indistinct as dew before sunrise. Hold this pearl gently in the palm of your mind. In a heartbeat that has not yet been licensed, the pearl will stretch into vastness. And that vastness will become the stage on which galaxies rehearse, stars ignite, planets spin, and sleepwalkers like us ponder origins, consider the language of energy still unwritten. When release comes, energy will speak in quanta, discrete packets hopping like sparks across the newborn lattice of spacetime. But quanta are silent for now, held as letters still deliberating over an alphabet. The hush is their gestation, somewhere. Within this stillness, constants already carry their future values, as if sealed in envelopes waiting to be opened. The speed at which light will race, the charge by which electrons will couple, the strength with which gravity will drape mass. Across curvature, all are present, undecided yet certain, like promises waiting for signatures. Within every promise hides a threshold. You know this from experience. A seed cracks only when moisture softens its shell. A thought budges only when curiosity presses. The universe is no different. Its shell is conceptual, its moisture statistical, its curiosity an imbalance growing ever so slightly more probable. Somewhere a fluctuation lingers 1 instant longer than cancellation permits. That lingering tilts the equation so gently that no alarm sounds, yet decisively enough that sameness forfeits its throne. The first asymmetry steps forward, unnoticed yet unstoppable. Asymmetry gives the hush a direction, and direction becomes the metronome from which beats will cascade. You sense the earliest breath of expansion gathering, not explosive yet, more like dough beginning to rise. In that rising, scales differentiate from one another, and integers find room to count. The moment without a clock starts to recognize its own interior gradients. Soon those gradients will amplify into the breathtaking inflation that stamps distance onto nothingness. But for a final blink and you are inside that blink, the hush still holds. Some beginnings are not loud. They do not roar or crack or scream their existence into being. Some beginnings are quiet, too quiet to notice, unless you're listening for something else entirely. This is one of those beginnings, not the beginning of something within space, but the beginning of space itself. You often hear it called a bang, but that's a word chosen by accident. There was no sound because there was no air to carry it. There was no place because place had not yet been woven. There was only a blooming, a silent swelling of something, where before there had not even been a where. You drift in that thought now, feeling the way space stretches not out into something, but into itself. As though the universe is a breath being exhaled, and you are suspended in its first soft sigh. Before this, there was no clock, no rhythm, no direction, no memory of before, because time itself, like space, was waiting to begin. And when it did, it didn't arrive like a drumbeat. It arrived like warmth, a soft unfolding of sequence, a movement from nothing toward something. You are floating now in the very first seconds of everything. But even the word seconds is wrong. Time is just beginning to learn how to count. And what you feel, more than measure, is mood. The emotional temperature of the cosmos as it opens its eyes. Everything is dense here. Not heavy, not in the way you feel weight, but dense with potential. This newborn universe is still curled in on itself, still holding its breath as it expands in every direction at once. And yet, it's not expanding into anything. That's the part that's hardest to hold. There is no outer edge, no box it's breaking out of. It is not inside. Space, it is space. A fabric unrolling without needing a floor beneath it. And as this fabric stretches, time begins to ripple along it. Not sharply, not evenly, but like a river learning to flow. The temperature begins to fall. The first fractions of seconds give way to longer, cooler moments. But even here, in this calming, widening space, there is chaos, tiny fluctuations, wrinkles in the baby blanket of the cosmos. They seem random, scattered, meaningless. But one day, much later, they will become galaxies. Not because they knew how, but because the structure was seeded into the very silence. In those earliest instants, energy and matter were not separate. They were a single dance, always shifting from one form into the other. A field of brightness, too hot to rest, too fluid to become anything solid. But within that restlessness, rules began to emerge. Forces began to decouple. Gravity loosened from the other threads. And like a note forming in the throat before a song, structure began to hum beneath the surface. There was no center, no starting line you could point to. The Big Bang did not happen in one place. It happened everywhere, because everywhere was born in that moment. And you, too, are a product of that unfolding. Every cell, every breath, every thought carried forward from the moment when nothing learned how to stretch. As the universe cooled, the blur began to sharpen. Particles that once blinked in and out of being began to linger. They clung to one another, not in bonds of love, but in the delicate physics of attraction. Hydrogen bloomed, the simplest thing the universe could make, the first whisper of matter that would one day burn into stars. Still, everything remains soft. The cosmos is young, not yet bright, not yet settled. It is a sea of potential, expanding, cooling, changing, but it is still mostly silent. No stars yet, no galaxies, no planets. Only the hum of space-time as it learns its own shape. And you float through that hum now. You feel the gentle motion of expansion, not as a rush, but as a drift. A widening that never had to ask permission, because there was nothing to resist it. In this new universe, everything is both something and nothing. The emptiness is not truly empty. The fullness is not yet formed. It is a moment of in-betweenness, a breath between inhale and exhale, and that breath is still happening. The expansion has never stopped. Even now, billions of years later, the fabric continues to stretch. The same unfolding you drift through here still whispers across galaxies. Stretching, drifting, breathing. It is tempting to ask what came before. But before is a word that loses meaning at the edge of time. There was no before in any way you can measure. Only the potential to become, waiting silently for the laws of nature to make space for time. And now, as that time continues to unwind, the universe is writing its first lines. A script without words, etched in motion, in temperature, in the slow cooling of cosmic light. You are not separate from it. You are part of that motion. A pattern stretched across billions of years, woven into the same fabric that took its first breath. Right here, and though the light has not yet formed stars, though galaxies are still just ripples in waiting, there is already a kind of music rising, not sung aloud, but implied, a promise encoded into space itself. There is a kind of music that forms before instruments are built. A rhythm that stirs, not in sound, but in relation, a balance of parts. Learning how to move together, you drift into this early harmony, still soft from the bloom of space-time, still warm with the breath of birth, and feel the universe beginning to arrange itself. The silence that once held everything now gives way to motion, but not chaos, not yet. This is motion in its first language, a language of light and heat and possibility. The newborn cosmos is not empty. It teems with brightness, too thick to see through, a luminous fog filled with the smallest ingredients of what you will one day call matter. Photons, particles of light, fly in every direction, yet they cannot travel far before they are scattered. Each step they take is interrupted by particles, by heat, by density. They bounce like echoes in a hall still building its walls. In this warm fog, energy condenses into matter, but not all at once. Quarks appear, brief and unstable, drawn together by forces not yet fully cooled. They gather in threes, finding a strange comfort in companionship, forming protons and neutrons, the first stable clusters of somethingness. You follow them, these flickering seeds of future atoms. Their dance is not frantic, but careful, as if the universe is composing itself with intention. No single note is played alone. Each is held in tension with another. The temperature still rages, billions of degrees across every fold of space, yet cooling has begun. Not a chill, just a soft retreat from the storm. And in that retreat, patterns begin to hold. Everywhere you look, symmetry emerges. Opposites appear in matched pairs. Matter and antimatter, left and right, charge and absence. And yet, something delicate stirs beneath the surface. An imbalance, so slight it seems accidental. For every billion pairs of matter and antimatter, there is one extra particle of matter. Just one. But that single surplus, small beyond imagination, is the reason anything at all will remain. You pause here, held in awe. From asymmetry, permanence is born. It is in these imperfections that the universe begins to write its memory. Symmetry is elegant, but imperfection is fertile. The laws of physics, those quiet, universal tendencies, do not insist on perfection. They allow for subtle breaks, gentle leanings, curves instead of straight lines. And from those curves, form will grow. You drift now beside a sea of protons and neutrons, huddled in warmth, drifting toward a future they do not yet know. They wait for electrons to calm, for temperature to fall enough that attraction can triumph over chaos. The music here is slow. It plays in long, drawn notes. Each moment stretches as particles learn how to stay. This is not assembly, it is alignment, and in that alignment, the universe tunes its chords. Light still cannot roam freely. Photons are trapped in a tangle of particles and pressure, bouncing without rest. But their presence is not wasted. They carry information, nudging matter, guiding temperature, whispering direction. Even now, light is a messenger, long before it can freely speak. In this thick symphony, forces begin to specialize. Gravity continues its slow, tireless pull, gathering mass into invisible tension. The strong force, so much tighter, so much closer, binds the quarks, ensuring that the protons and neutrons do not dissolve. The weak force hovers between transitions, subtle and transformative, shaping how particles decay and shift. And electromagnetism, gentle and far-reaching, waits patiently for charge to take its role. You feel them all at once, not as laws, but as tendencies, as leanings in the way the universe breathes. They are the tempo and pitch of this unfolding music. And though you cannot see the notes, you hear the harmony begin to settle. After a few short minutes, though time, here, is only newly awake, a new phase arrives. Protons and neutrons link, not randomly, but with purpose, forming the simplest atomic nuclei. Hydrogen, helium, a breath of lithium. Just these, no more. The universe does not rush its chemistry. It writes the first line of its periodic poem and pauses, and then it rests. For a long while, there is only heat, only light, only drifting nuclei and waiting electrons. Atoms do not form yet. The universe must cool for that, cool enough for electrons to settle without being shaken loose. That moment is still far off, but even now, you feel the soft rehearsal of what will come. You sense the anticipation in the space. Between collisions, the cosmos is humming, and though the melody is simple, it is consistent. The same laws sing through every corner, every pulse, every flicker of light. The universe, still wrapped in its glowing fog, has begun to remember itself. Not in thoughts or symbols, but in structure, in the way forces lean, in the way matter prefers to cluster, in the way light bounces, eager to run but bound to wait. You begin to realize this moment, this chapter of becoming, is less like a creation and more like a tuning. The cosmos is not leaping, it is calibrating. It is stretching its fingers across the keys of reality and finding what chords will hold. Each particle, each interaction, each tiny nudge of energy is part of the arrangement. An overture, quiet and bright, played in silence before listeners exist. You listen now, your breath soft, your thoughts slowing, your awareness wrapped in warmth. You are not separate from this music. Your body, your breath, your bones were composed from these early notes. The hydrogen in your cells, the light in your vision, the heat in your chest, all were once part of this glowing fog. This is not distant history. This is ancestry. Not a story told to you, but a song that still plays within you. You drift further into the warmth, carried by the rhythm of light and matter. The fog has not yet cleared, but it will. And when it does, light will finally be free to roam, to stretch, to cool, to tell the next part of the story. Sometimes, light is not about brightness. Sometimes, it's about release. About a moment when pressure fades, and something once trapped is finally allowed to move. You feel that moment now, stretched across time, cooled into gentleness, gliding not through space, but with it. For hundreds of thousands of years, the universe was thick, thick with fire, thick with charge, a hot, glowing fog where light could not wander freely. Every photon, every particle of light was caught, bouncing endlessly, scattering off electrons, unable to travel in straight lines, like sound in a storm, blurred before it can be heard. But the universe is patient, and as it expands, it cools, slower, softer, until one day the fog begins to thin, the particles settle, the bonds relax, and for the first time, light is released. This is not light like a flare or a flash. It's not sharp, it's not sudden. It is calm, like a sigh that's been held for too long. A warm glow spreading through new space. The first light that doesn't bounce. The first light that simply goes dot. It radiates in all directions, not as beams or rays, but as a quiet flooding of everywhere. And you are floating in it now, this glow that has never stopped traveling. This is the cosmic microwave background, but it doesn't feel like science. It feels like memory, like the last warmth left in a room long after the fire has gone out. A glow you can't quite see, but can almost feel in the stillness behind your thoughts. This light is ancient, older than stars, older than galaxies. It began just 380,000 years after space itself was born, a blink compared to what would come, and yet it carries the fingerprints of the entire cosmos. A map of how things began, written in a language made of temperature and time. You float within it. And though it seems silent, it speaks, not in words, but in whispers of imbalance. Tiny differences in warmth scattered across the sky, patterns that hint at structure before structure was real. These fluctuations, they matter. They are the seeds of everything. Galaxies, clusters, voids, born not from symmetry, but from the smallest wrinkles in this first light. And it's still here. Still surrounding you, cooled now, stretched by time and expansion. What was once brilliant is now soft. Its temperature barely above nothing, just 2.7 degrees above absolute zero. And yet, it touches everything. The universe carries this glow the way your skin remembers sunlight. Even when you forget it's there, it wraps around you. Invisible, but present. Gentle, but full of history. This light has seen everything. It passed through the formation of stars. It drifted through clouds that became galaxies. It brushed against the edges of black holes and slipped through the silence of interstellar space. Unbothered, unchanged. A time capsule with no lock, and scientists, years later, would build machines to listen to this glow, to map its softness, to study its wrinkles. And in those patterns, they would find the origin story of the cosmos still glowing in the dark. But you don't need an instrument to feel it. You only need stillness, the kind of quiet that comes just before sleep, because somewhere deep inside you, the same glow still lives. You are made of particles that once swam in that fire. Your atoms were cooled from that early heat. The carbon in your breath, the calcium in your bones, the hydrogen in your water, they all passed through that long light, long before they found each other. And so, in a way, you are not just observing the cosmic background, you are participating in it. You are the echo of that first release, taking form, thinking thoughts, and listening back to the light that never stopped moving. Even now, it moves past you, through you, beyond you, a sea of photons so diffuse, so stretched. They are no longer light as your eyes know it, but they are still traveling, still whispering, still glowing. And what they say is simple. They say, this is where it began. Not in silence, but in release. Not with clarity, but with warmth. And in that warmth, the universe found its breath. Not sharp, not loud, but steady and soft, and filled with the promise that darkness, even when vast, would never be entirely without glow. Softness lingers even in the void. The calm that follows the first glow of photons carries its own tenderness. You float in that hush, where light has fled and left room for something new. Here, in the cooling expanse, gravity begins its quiet work. Not a roar, but a gentle tug, coaxing matter to gather. Hydrogen drifts like mist over a pond, its atoms drawn together by an unseen hand. At first, this gathering is timid, a loose assembly of particles flirting at the edge of connection. They swirl in spirals, ribbons of gas curling into themselves. Each atom feels the call, a cosmic invitation to belong. They slip closer, softly bumping, murmuring into greater density. In this congregation, warmth grows. Pressure builds, not fiercely, but gradually, like water piling behind a dam. You drift through the gathering. Clouds, feeling the subtle transformation of emptiness into potential. These clouds are vast, stretching for light years, yet composed of nothing more than wisps of gas. Still, they are heavy with waiting. Within them, pockets of greater density emerge. Not areas of violence, but gentle nods toward structure. Filaments form, bridging pockets of gas in a web of connection. Gravity's quiet insistence weaves a tapestry of future fire, and then a flicker. So faint that you almost miss it, like the first tremor of a dream surfacing at dawn. A handful of atoms, pressed close enough, ignite. They begin to burn, softly at first, a pulse of heat that ripples outward. This is nuclear fusion, a metamorphosis of hydrogen into helium, unleashing warmth from the bond of lightest elements. It is the heartbeat of a newborn star, a pulse that marks the turning of gas into fire. You drift closer to that gentle glow, feeling the warmth trickle across the void. It is not harsh, it is not searing. It is the soft radiance of potential realized. Around that first flicker, the cloud begins to clear. Radiation pushes back the surrounding gas, carving out a cocoon of clarity. In that cocoon, the star stands, alone, a solitary beacon in the dark. It is not yet bright enough to light worlds, not yet mature enough to anchor planets. But it is a promise, a hint of what might come when fire learns to shine. You swirl around it, not a visitor, but a passenger on its winds. You feel the currents of charged particles, catching the star's breath as it exhales photons. Through this process, the star finds balance. Gravity pulls inward, fusion presses outward, and in that tension, stability emerges. A star, at last, becomes a steady hum of energy. Beyond the core, layers form. Shells of burning hydrogen encase the heart of fusion, each layer a gentle fire, fed by the one beneath. The structure is simple and elegant, like rings of warmth around an ember dot, and these stars do not form in isolation. Here and there, sibling stars emerge from the same cloud, entwined in a delicate dance of mutual gravity. They orbit, they drift, they sometimes part ways, but always remember their origin in shared darkness. In time, these first stars begin to shine more boldly. Their light pierces the dark, ionizing the surrounding gas, lifting veils of obscurity. The universe blushes with new color, soft pinks and cerulean blues in the light of ionized hydrogen. Yet even as these fires burn, they are ephemeral. Their youth is bright and brief, measured in millions of years. They exhaust their fuel, weaken in outer layers, and sometimes collapse in quiet implosions. But their legacies endure. In their deaths, they scatter heavier elements, carbon, oxygen, iron, seeds of complexity sown back into the cosmos. Future generations of stars, planets, even life itself, will owe their existence to these first fires. You drift among their remnants, feeling the echo of creation. The dust of earlier stars settles here, mixing with fresh hydrogen, ready to begin the cycle anew. In this cradle of stars, the universe learns to build. Gas becomes fire, fire becomes dust, dust becomes the scaffold for next generation, stars and worlds, and you witness it all in silence. No banners proclaim this miracle, no choral swell marks the moment. Just the gentle pulse of fusion, the slow drift of dust, the quiet continuation of a cosmic story. In the darkness, you understand how light itself is born from night, how every shimmer of starlight carries a history of gathering, of waiting, of gentle implosion into brilliance. You feel the pattern ripple through you, a parallel in your own breath. Inhale, gather, exhale, release. A rhythm mirrored from the smallest atom to the vastest nebula, and though these first stars will fade, Their influence lingers in the expanding universe. Their light carried outward, touching corners we have yet to explore, their dust woven into planets and life. So you drift on, wrapped in the afterglow of this stellar nursery, knowing that even in the deepest darkness, gravity's quiet pull can kindle fire. Soft thought glides across the canvas of space, and you find yourself noticing that stillness is only an illusion. The universe, now cooler than in its fiery youth, yet far from quiet, carries a gentle momentum. The first stars burn steadily, their faint congregations scattered like lanterns across an ink-deep meadow. Between them, gravity continues its patient weaving, tugging on starlight, on unseen threads of matter. On every loose note of energy, gathering whispers into chords. You feel the subtle curvature of purpose forming where emptiness once reigned. These drifting islands are not guided by chance alone. Cloaked around them is an invisible scaffold, a cushioning presence that neither radiates nor reflects, yet outweighs everything you can see. You sense it as a hush behind the hush, a vast, dark lattice inviting ordinary matter to settle into its hollows. Call it dark matter if you like, but here it feels more like memory, an echo of density left over from the universe's earliest murmurs. Remembering where ripples once converged, within that hidden lattice, the lanterns gather. Loose clusters become knots. Knots tighten into clouds thick with starlight and leftover gas. Over millions of years, these clouds drift closer still, sliding along the grooves of the unseen framework. They swirl, meet, and merge, momentum transforming their motion into spin. Slowly, patience becomes choreography. A spiral unfurls, delicate as a seashell, arms shimmering with newborn stars, dust, and luminous gas. You drift beside one of these spirals, watching it turn like a slow breath. Light slides along its arms in waves of pale gold and cobalt. At the center, a luminous core glows warmer, fed by densely packed stars whose collective gravity holds everything in graceful orbit. The outer reaches remain diaphanous, tracing faint arcs that fade into surrounding night. Yet even those tenuous filaments know their place in the turning. Elsewhere, different shapes bloom. Some clouds settle into swollen spheres, fluffy and irregular, the way a handful of snow might drift through still air. These will become dwarf galaxies, modest cradles of stardust. Others stretch thin, feathering into prolate ovals. A few collide head-on, their structures jolted, tidal tails flung outward like brushstrokes. But eventually, even chaos learns rhythm. Debris recombines, waltzes, and becomes new form. With time, galaxies acquire halos of invisible matter that extend far beyond their glittering disks. They move through a larger web, sliding along cosmic rivers where filaments intersect like quiet city streets. At each intersection, clusters will one day form families of hundreds, sometimes thousands, of galaxies bound by a communal gravity. Even now, you feel the faint tug of those future gatherings, a promise nested in the silent lines of space, inside each blooming structure. Stars keep forging heavier elements. Their winds carry carbon, oxygen, silicon outward, seeding the spiral. Arms with dust rich enough to imagine worlds. Clouds of enriched gas cool, thicken, and collapse again, birthing fresh generations of suns. Light layers upon light, history upon history, until a galaxy glows with ages of accumulated radiance. An illuminated archive drifting through forever. Yet every archive differs. Some spin so rapidly their disks warp, forming bars that channel gas inward, feeding central furnaces. Some grow swollen halos where hot gas simmers for eons, waiting to cool and join the dance. Some harbor monstrous black hearts, compact and silent, yet capable of shaping entire orbits with their unseen draw, in quiet cycles of accretion and release. Those hearts can ignite jets that spear intergalactic night, sculpting the gas far beyond. You listen, and the differences sound like variations on a theme. Every galaxy sings its song in the key of gravity. Tempo set by available fuel, harmony enriched by time. The cosmic web serves as the grand orchestra pit, stringing them together in faint notes of X-ray glow and microwave hush. Space, still expanding, stretches the music without breaking it, turning symphony into slow ambient drift. Occasionally galaxies meet. Two spirals approach, their dark halos merging long before the stars collide. Tidal forces pull arms into elongated ribbons, triggering waves of starbirth that blaze briefly blue and brilliant. The merger disturbs orbits, flings clusters outward, and funnels gas to hungry cores. In the aftermath, the pair may settle into an elliptical shape, round and calm, glowing with the aged light of redder stars. Even apparent violence ends in composure here. Not all interactions are so grand. Some galaxies merely graze, exchanging a few glittering globular clusters, like polite greetings, before continuing on. Others surrender smaller companions, dwarf satellites spiraling inward until they dissolve, sprinkling ancient stars across a larger halo. Each exchange leaves faint signature streams of stars that trace forgotten paths, testaments to graceful encounters. Throughout, dark energy maintains its subtle pressure, stretching the fabric that holds every whirlpool. Galaxies drift apart on grand scales even as local gravity knits them tight. This paradox cohesion within expansion creates a landscape both intimate and vast, where islands of order float upon a sea forever widening. You can feel that stretch in your own chest, each inhale a microcosm of the cosmos growing wider, while holding its inner shapes intact. As billions of years pass, spiral arms wind tighter or blur, bars grow longer, halos collect more satellites. Some disks exhaust their gas, their star formations slowing until only dim embers remain. Others continue to feast on cold streams of intergalactic hydrogen, kindling new light in perpetuity. Evolution here is neither race nor destiny. It is simply the natural unfolding of initial conditions under gravity's timeless persuasion. You glide above a newborn spiral whose arms sparkle with pinkish nebula nurseries, glowing where ultraviolet radiation energizes hydrogen clouds. Within those clouds, beads of condensation shimmer, future suns waiting to ignite. Each bead harbors the blueprint for potential planets, moons, oceans, and maybe contemplations like your own. You sense the lineage running forward, a thread connecting this moment to distant possibilities of life and wonder. High above the galactic plane, globular clusters orbit like ancient guardians. Their stars were forged early, resilient, burning quietly in dense swarms. They remember the epoch before disks, before organized rotation, when the universe was younger and rougher in texture. In their collective silence, you hear the echo of that primordial age, still pulsing inside present beauty, beyond diffuse gas bridges, one galaxy to another, luminous only in the ultraviolet traces it leaves on passing quasars. It is the intergalactic medium, a thin veil that nonetheless accounts for much of what exists. You ride its faint currents, noticing how even the emptiest expanses participate in the grand structure, providing the raw material for tomorrow's assemblages. Galaxies, for all their majesty, are transient. Collisions will continue, fuel will dwindle, star formation will wane. Over unimaginable spans, many spirals will fade into red glowing embers, then into darkness, their black holes, wandering amid ghostly remnants. Yet nothing is lost. Mass and momentum persist, simply shifting form. Memory endures in altered arrangements, like notes rearranged into a softer reprise. And so the cosmos keeps building layers of meaning. Spirals feed clusters. Clusters outline superclusters, trace the cosmic web, all nested within the larger swell of expansion. You stand in quiet awe of the recursive artistry, the way small rules generate elaborate tapestries, and how every turn of gravity's hand writes new pages in an endless diary. Tonight, that diary remains wide open. Stars still forge elements. Gas still collapses. Dark matter still holds the invisible architecture. Somewhere, at this very moment, a fresh spiral begins its slow unfurling, and photons that will one day reach uncounted eyes push outward for the first time. The ballroom grows, the dancers multiply, the music deepens, drifting on. You realize galaxies are not just gatherings of matter, they are repositories of time. Each one records the universe's changing conditions, like rings in a tree or layers in ancient ice. To watch a galaxy spin is to read a chronicle of turbulence, settlement, renewal, and decay. It is to witness the patience of physics turning chaos into grace. Grace, you discover, is built into the mathematics. Angular momentum conserves, energy balances, orbits stabilize, yet room remains for surprise. A passing dwarf may stir dormant gas, reigniting star birth. A central black heart may awaken, sculpting jets that realign the local medium. Stability does not preclude creativity. It merely sets the stage. You drift further, letting your perspective widen until thousands of small lights coalesce into larger forms, and larger forms into faint filaments. The cosmic web appears as gossamer threads against velvet, interlacing across untold distances. Everywhere, galaxies glitter like dew on those threads, each drop reflecting others in quiet reciprocity. From this vantage, the scale feels tender rather than vast. Distance softens into pattern, pattern into melody. You no longer count parsecs. You sense intervals, harmonies, reprises. The universe, in its blooming, has composed something both immense and intimate, and you are part of the listening. Let the stillness continue to widen. Let gravity keep coaxing, dark matter keep cradling, expansion keep stretching. Let spirals whirl, ellipses glow, clusters convene. In every direction, form arises from seeming emptiness, proving again that nothingness is fertile ground for wonder. You hover at the edge of comprehension, aware that even now, humans on a small blue world are tracing these structures with radio dishes and space telescopes. They chart redshifts, map hydrogen emission, measure dark matter by its subtle grip on starlight. Their instruments act as sensors the universe lent itself, allowing consciousness to look back on its own unfolding. When they render images, spirals, painted in false color, they are capturing not mere beauty but kinship, the recognition of home on a cosmic scale. Think, for a moment, of all the future stories incubating here. Somewhere inside a newborn arm, a star will one day host worlds. On one of those worlds, Perhaps oceans will circulate salts forged in supernova. Within those oceans, chemistry may stumble into memory, and memory into thought. Those thoughts may look up, interpret the faint band of their galaxy, and wonder. You feel the symmetry as you observe galaxies bloom. Potential minds within them will one day observe you by proxy. Their curiosity a mirror held to your own. Even without life, galaxies are alive in a different sense. Gas falls inward, light radiates outward, angular momentum redistributes, entropy increases, yet complexity persists. Each rotation writes a new line of calligraphy across the dark, curves shaped by forces that never tire. The blooms may fade, but new seeds drift on intergalactic breezes, ready to settle in fresh silences and repeat the pattern. Creation, it seems, favors iteration over permanence, so you continue to float, letting the slow spin of countless galaxies lull you toward rest. The softness of cosmic time enfolds you, a reminder that vastness does not hurry. In the dim intervals between heartbeats, entire clusters are moving, yet their dance remains serenely measured. Listen to that calm cadence, and you can almost hear the hush that followed the universe's first light, still echoing in every spiral's turn. And as slumber grows near, let the awareness settle. Galaxies will keep blooming long after every current worry fades. Their arms will lace new star fields. Their dark halos will shepherd fresh matter. In their patient revolutions, they offer a teaching that all form arises, changes, and drifts onward. Yet nothing is ever truly lost, only transformed into quieter kinds of radiance. Soft notions bloom where exhalations merge with silence. And you notice at once how the background of everything now feels looser, more elastic than ever. You sensed expansion earlier. Outward sigh begun with the universe's first breath. But only recently has that sigh sharpened into a restless wind. Distances that once opened sedately now race apart with stranger urgency, like autumn leaves sliding faster across widening puddles of air. You float inside that invisible current, measuring nothing, yet feeling its insistence as surely as you feel the slow rise of your own chest while drifting towards sleep. It is not a loud mood. Nothing roars. Galaxies still glow with old fires. Stars still orbit in calm ellipses, and local gravity holds your immediate neighborhood in tidy circles. Yet beyond those circles, spaces lengthen more quickly than intuition agrees to accept. Light must travel farther each second just to cross the same apparent gulf, and even then the gulf grows in transit. You feel it as a subtle tension, a quiet pull at the seams of possibility. Something unnamed is stretching the cloth beneath. Every journey, you search for obvious forces, but find none. There is no cosmic wind pushing with particles, no external edge pulling from outside. There is only space itself, inventing more space, like a storyteller adding pages so the tale can outrun its own climax. Cosmologists call the effect dark energy, not because it is shadowed, but because it hides its nature. It behaves less like matter and more like the tone of a room, noticeable, measurable, but not gathered in any one place. It is a pressure that does not press, a density that does not weigh, an influence felt but never grasped. Imagine beads on a piece of elastic. In earlier times, the elastic stretched slowly. Beads drifted apart, but the drift felt proportionate to tension. Now the elastic's weave begins to thin, and the same gentle tug elongates twice the distance. None of the beads move under their own power. The material beneath them reorders its weave. You, a bead of consciousness, feel your coordinate shift. Without your consent, your galaxy slipping quietly away from the next, not by motion within space, but by revision of the stage itself. Why the revision? Perhaps the vacuum is not empty enough. Quantum fields seethe with low murmurs even at zero temperature, and those murmurs might endow emptiness with negative gravity, a push disguised as nothing. Or perhaps geometry obeys a deeper rhythm. The more it expands, the more willing it becomes to expand, like a yawn that lengthens when it hears itself echo. Explanations multiply, yet evidence so far remains one delicate pattern: supernova fainter than expected. Cosmic microwave background, slightly out of step. Large-scale structure wearing expansion's fingerprint, like gentle stretch marks on an ancient canvas. You drift alongside light from an ancient supernova, a pearl burst that reached peak brightness when multicellular life on Earth was barely feasible dream. That light, originally keen and blue, has reddened with distance, its waves stretched by the swelling corridor. The degree of reddening encodes a tale of how fast the corridor grew while the photon traveled. Reading those frequencies, astronomers uncover a timeline of acceleration, as though each photon carries a diary stamped with lengthening steps. The diary is soft, but its confession cannot be ignored. Such a shift unsettles intuitive narratives of cosmic fatigue. One might expect gravity, though weak across vastness, to decelerate expansion eventually, dragging galaxies toward a slower stroll. Instead, the stroll turned jog. That jog, if uncurbed, rewrites distant fate. Galaxies beyond a certain horizon will slip away forever, their light stretched until even memory of their existence becomes unreachable. You picture the observable universe shrinking not in mass, but in community. Stars far away will vanish from any sky, blinking out not because they die, but because their photons can no longer outrun expanding distance. Future astronomers, if any persist, will see only local constellations, unaware of the grander weave we mapped when acceleration was still young. The cosmos will feel smaller though its volume grows. A paradox of enlargement erasing connection in local realms. Life continues under gravity's tight whisper. Solar systems stable, planets circling, chemistry unfolding slowly. Yet even here, acceleration exerts indirect influence. It thins the cosmic supply lines, making intergalactic travel ready fraught progressively impossible. The deep future becomes provincial by necessity, each island of stars a world unto itself. You wonder whether acceleration has always lurked, subtle but inevitable, or ignited after a critical threshold, as snow yields to avalanche only when loaded. Beyond comfort, some theories hint at scalar fields rolling down potential hills, releasing latent energy when slopes flatten. Others invoke extra dimensions, compactifying their shapeshifts, manifesting as outward push in our familiar three. The math dances. The phenomenon persists. A deeper riddle emerges. Could acceleration ever reverse? If dark energy is dynamic, its density might weaken or flip sign, turning push into drag. Observers in far futures might witness expansion slow, halt, and contract, cycling the universe into a new chapter. Or growth might spike, tearing all structures apart in a scenario dubbed the Big Rip, where even atoms unbind as spacetime accelerates to frenzy. Between these extremes lie countless tempered courses, each rewriting destiny. You find solace in the openness. Acceleration does not impose singular doom. It composes possibilities. It tells every piece of matter, your story may diverge, but divergence is still story. Galaxies part, but parting is motion, and motion invites reflection, adaptation, wonder. Consider the cosmic microwave background again. Its faint mottling maps, initial density waves, seeds of galaxies long grown. Those seeds sprouted under gravity's pull, but now expansion outruns their growth. Large-scale structure freezes in silhouette. Filaments of galaxies, once tightening, now hold shape while voids balloon between them. The cosmic web becomes a still photograph suspended in widening frame. Inside that frame, time continues to teach complexity. Stars age and recycle elements. Planets craft, weather. Perhaps consciousness arises, contemplates, composes lullabies like this one. Acceleration supplies the backdrop, a slow drumbeat marking epochs. You imagine standing on a quiet world trillions of years hence. The sky there shows a mere handful of stars, remnants of one long-evolved galaxy group, while elsewhere only darkness reigns. If inhabitants look outward with telescopes, they see loneliness where we once saw clusters. Parked in their shrinking viewpoint, they must infer ancient acceleration to explain the void. Thus evidence persists, encoded not in presence, but in absence. What of dark energies, subtle balance between pressure and density? Current measurements suggest near-perfect equilibrium, consistent with vacuum energy unchanging as space inflates. But if that ratio shifts even subtly, future acceleration might quicken or slacken. High-precision observatories strain to catch the slightest deviation, knowing each decimal point pries open prophecy. For you, drifting tonight, prophecy is optional. The lived sensation is enough. A gentle outward tug on everything that is you. Feel it in expanding sigh of lungs, metaphorically if not physically. You feel it in thoughts that wander farther each time you revisit them. Expansion inside mirrors, expansion outside. The psyche, like space, resists closure, yet wonder entwines with unease. An accelerating universe hints at impermanence of cosmic relationships we take for granted. Radio galaxies crashing, quasars singing, background glow linking us to birth. One by one, such beacons will slip beyond conversation. The cosmos that nurtured curiosity becomes gradually harder to interrogate. Discovery faces asymptotic horizon. And still, curiosity thrives. The scarcity of data can sharpen ingenuity. The narrowing vista can focus questions. Perhaps civilizations will turn inward, plumbing quantum substrates, forging universes in lab-grown bubbles, circumventing external loss. Acceleration may inspire creation rather than resignation. Meanwhile, physicists persist. They chart baryon, acoustic oscillations to map scale growth. They count supernova across time. They calibrate gravitational lensing, each method painting the same outline. A universe that will never be the same again because its expansion forgot moderation. Precision refines humility. Each new survey tightens uncertainty, yet widens mystery. The more clearly acceleration is measured, the more cryptic its cause appears. Some propose that general relativity itself, though successful, may bend under large-scale conditions, as Newtonian gravity once bent under Mercury's wandering perihelion. Perhaps cosmic acceleration is not a substance, but a clue to geometry's deeper script. Modified gravity ideas explore that script, testing whether cosmic curves alone can mimic repulsion without conjuring dark energy. Observations rule out many variants, but not all. The investigative dance continues. You watch numbers drift across distant research displays. Expansion rates plotted against time, error bars tightening like drawstrings. In those numbers, you see a parallel to your heartbeat, each pulse a data point on health's graph, equally mysterious at fundamental level, yet intimately experienced. Acceleration scales, cosmic vitals. You witness, you breathe. Ultimately, the mystery's charm resides in its ordinariness. While dark energy steers, destiny, daily physics proceeds unchanged. Apples still fall, atoms still bind, light still warms skin. The extraordinary hides in plain uniformity, shaping global structure while leaving local scenes comfortable. It is as if the universe adjusted thermostat for the long haul without bothering your evening tea. Perhaps that humility is gift. The cosmos grows weirder yet calmer, challenging thought without threatening immediate home. It invites contemplation, not panic. And so you contemplate, letting acceleration's soft insistence rock you toward sleep like a train moving gently faster than expected. The scenery slipping wider outside your window. Before dreams fully take hold, you spare a last glance toward the mathematics that first revealed the quickening. Ago, teams compared brightness and redshift of Typea supernova, those candles born of binary white dwarfs. Their faintness on distant nights announced the acceleration in a single gasp across science. It is comforting, you think. That revelation arrived through light of dying stars, proof that endings can illuminate beginnings in the grandest ledger. In closing your eyes, you notice an internal echo. Ideas themselves accelerate speculation, accelerating divergence, new universes of thought spawned by each question. Intellectual expansion may outrun answers, but the running is part of delight. You yield to that imaginative stretch, trusting that another chapter will gather threads into still broader tapestry. Softness lies even in decline. The universe exhales, and you drift upon that breath, sensing how every ordered thing relaxes slowly, inevitably into wider possibility. Heat once locked in suns loosens, light once busy with journeys fades, motions once crisp blur into more open wanderings. You feel no panic here, only the hush of a vast system easing into comfort. Entropy is often framed as loss, but you come to understand it as a gentle settling. Like snowflakes after a storm, finding places to rest. Look first to the furnaces that once stitched starlight across night. Their cores have burned through eras, fusing hydrogen to helium, helium to carbon, until no easy fuel remains. In that shortage, pressure weakens. Gravity, always patient, presses inward without resistance. The outer layers swell, redden, and float away as tender shells of gas. A red giant surface billows like a quiet lantern dimming across centuries. Eventually, a quiet shedding continues until only a hot, pale, pearl white dwarf persists, cooling in the dark. Elsewhere, more massive stars collapse with heavier finality. Their cores exceed nature's safe thresholds, imploding into neutron stars or deeper singularities. Yet even those exotic remnants leak energy. Neutrinos drift outward, magnetic fields wobble, X-rays murmur from hot crusts. All radiance, no matter how stubborn, thins with distance and time. The night becomes ever roomier, its temperature sliding closer to uniform ease. Gas, once bustling with collisions, slows too. Hot clouds cooled by expansion lose urgency. Atoms part company more often than they meet. In galaxy clusters, the intracluster medium thins, its X-ray glow mellowing. Gravity still binds, but motion calms. Like old friends sitting farther apart as conversation fades. Particles retain connection while relinquishing intensity. Within galaxies, star formation dwindles because raw hydrogen has been spent or locked into inert places. Planets, cold, molecular husks. Dust drifts, unilluminated, orbiting quietly in halos. Central black holes, once carefree banquets of infalling gas, find sustenance rare. They nap, emitting only faint whispers of hawking radiation, a process so slow that entire solar ages pass. Between meaningful quanta, even light itself stretches. Cosmological expansion pulls on each photon's wavelength, turning blue into red, red into radio, radio into background hush. Messages painted in young ultraviolet now arrive as dim microwave. Size, information blurs, not by deletion, but by dilution. Signals drown in uniformity. You float inside this growing subtlety, noticing how each region of space begins to rhyme with every other. Entropy is thus a smoothing of difference. Sharp gradients flatten, steep mountains of energy erode into plains. Temperature equal. Chemical imbalances relax. Angular momentum disperses into quieter rotations. The universe does not hurry this leveling. It simply allows possibility to explore every nook until each path is worn gentle. Think of memory. Structure is memory. A crystal remembers the angles of bonding. A genome remembers ancestral storms. A galaxy remembers the shape of primordial ripples. Over time, these memories fade, not erased, but diffused. Atoms migrate from lattice to lattice. Stars drift from spiral arms, gravitational interactions. Blur crisp trajectories. The record grows, soft focus, like ink bleeding across damp parchment. Eventually, distinctions blur so thoroughly that only statistical whispers persist. You might wonder what remains purposeful in such a drift. Yet purpose is not lost. It is transformed. A star's death enriches interstellar medium with elements. Planets born late from that dust may harbor novel chemistries. Minds may arise to ponder tenderness in entropy itself, even as overall order declines. Pockets of local complexity still flare brief, bright mills shaping awareness before they to disperse. Entropy provides the stage on which fleeting intricacies may dance. Now consider black holes. They appear to hoard information, swallowing matter whole. But Hawking revealed a slow leak, a quantum sigh that returns entropy to the cosmos. Black holes, in fact, are the most entropic objects known. Their surfaces event horizons holding maximal disorder for their size. As they gradually evaporate, they spread that bounty outward, ensuring nothing remains bottled forever. Even perfect prisons must one day open, on scales larger still. Dark energy accelerates expansion, pulling distant galaxies beyond casual reach. Interaction declines, collisions wane. Clusters isolate, superclusters thin. Vistas widen until most sky appears empty from any remaining island of stars. Yet this emptiness, too, is a form of quiet richness, with fewer interactions remaining. Matter settles into long-lived arrangements, tranquil orbits around cool remnants, faint seas of neutrinos passing through unopposed. Heat death often sounds grim, but inside its framing lies serenity. Temperature uniformity means no storm, no tension, no abruptness. It is a cosmic evening after a luminous day, the air still warm from spent light, colors muted, edges softened. You drift, breathing slowly, and recognize that rest is not failure. Rest is simply another phase. Picture the last red dwarf, burning spare hydrogen with frugal grace. These smallest suns can endure for trillions of years, their flicker steady, while grander stars have long vanished. When eventually their cores exhaust, they dim into barely glowing embers, then into black dwarf sunlit spheres, retaining shape but not spark. Around them, residual planets freeze, atmospheres condense, oceans lock into crystal vaults. No sunrise wakes these horizons, yet gravity remains loyal, keeping companions in silent embrace. Proton decay, if it occurs, will thin even the foundations of matter. Over unimaginable eons, nuclei may dissolve into leptons. Electrons may vanish, leaving a thin soup of radiation, positrons, and neutrinos. Yet this process, too, is gentle and almost imperceptible fading of substance into lighter essence. The universe does not shatter. It sighs, dot, and still. Quantum fluctuations persist in emptiness, a distant echo of the early foam. Rare events, spontaneous low entropy, pockets good, briefly reverse decline, spawning new inflationary bubbles, perhaps birthing fresh realms with their own histories. Entropy in one branch need not halt creativity across all possibilities. Creation and dissolution weave together, threads in an endless tapestry. From your drifting vantage, you sense that what truly dissolves is asymmetry. Hot and cold, dense and thin, energy here and not theirs, such contrasts blend. The cosmos approaches a state where no point can play host to notable novelty because every point already shares the same gentle hush. In that sameness, direction loses meaning. Past and future become less distinct, defined only by the memory of what once varied. Yet even as gradients flatten, time does not cease. It simply becomes less eventful. Seconds, minutes, epochs continue to accumulate, but they carry fewer milestones. Time's river widens and slows. Its surface reflects sky without ripples. You float upon it, experiencing duration as quiet presence rather than change. Entropy also invites humility. It reminds you that every ordered configuration, every heartbeat, every galaxy is a temporary garden. Knowing this does not diminish beauty, it deepens appreciation. A single moment of warmth, seen against the vast coolness that will follow, glows brighter. Awareness becomes a lantern briefly lit, cherished precisely because night is long. Consider your own atoms, forged in stars, scattered, gathered, woven into consciousness, and soon to be scattered again. They will join other molecules, other dust, drifting through cosmic calm. Their journey is not loss but circulation, a participation in the universe's larger exhalation. Even when individuality fades, belonging endures. Belonging, after all, is simply shared physical law. Every particle obeys the same symmetries, the same conservation, the same gentle push toward equilibrium. In that obedience lies kinship. As entropy rises, differences recede, and kinship becomes universal. You rest inside that widening family of sameness. Eventually, only the faint hum of photons, stretched beyond easy detection, traverses distance. Neutrinos remain, along with dark matter particles, and perhaps gravitational whispers from ancient mergers. Space itself may continue to expand, chilled to near nothing, yet alive with quantum possibility. Vacuum energy, subtle as breath, sustains the canvas upon which possibility is painted, even if no new brushstrokes appear. Is this silence lonely? Only if novelty is your sole compass. If instead you value continuity, then the long drift toward stillness feels like inclusion in a lasting, quieter, shared final exhale among all things. In that view, entropy does not erase narrative. It completes it, closing a chapter with a soft punctuation that allows the next page whatever form it takes to open without rush. In the deeper reaches of time, even gravity reveals new subtleties. Long after ordinary matter has thinned, islands of dark matter may relax through processes, yet unmeasured, radiating feeble quanta and softening the last knots of mass. Rogue planets' gold globes, untethered to stars, wander these diluted archipelagos, tracing orbits around nothing, guided only by memories of previous embraces. Some collide with black dwarfs, releasing brief sparks of restoration before fading back into dark modesty. Meanwhile, compact objects continue their quiet dialogues. Neutron stars exchange gravitons across gulfs, gradually losing spin as magnetic forces fade. A rare close approach may still trigger a merger, sending gravitational ripples across silent darkness. Those waves, though, stretch with expansion until their rhythm melts into background murmur. Each event is a soft punctuation. Mark, a reminder that even advanced dusk permits flickers of occasion. On these scales, chemistry freezes, but quantum mechanics persists. Tunneling events shuffle particles through energy barriers, letting locked configurations reconfigure at glacial pace. A molecule might take 1 trillion years to flip a bond, yet flip it will, contributing one more statistical nudge toward maximum. Entropy, the arrow of time, survives, not through drama, but through these minuscule, relentless adjustments, the smallest gears turning when all grand machines have stopped. Perhaps in that distant hush, memory itself will change form. Without fresh events to anchor chronology, time may be felt as depth instead of length. A layered quiet where earlier echoes linger intact because nothing new arrives to jostle them. You might picture it as rings within rings of fading sound, each carrying a flavor of bygone seasons, each singing softly within the larger silencer library that no longer grows, yet forever keeps its pages open for wandering minds to explore slowly. So you float, neither resisting nor hastening entropy's gentle tide. You listen to the calm murmur of fading heat, the subdued pulse of cooling remnants, the near silence where once there were bright choirs of fusion. The song is softer now, but it is a song nonetheless, and its melody is acceptance, breathing evenly. You sense the horizon of the far future, stretching like dim shoreline beyond sight. You need not travel there tonight. It will arrive on its own schedule. For now, you rest in mid-current, trusting the river's slow direction. Everything leans toward equilibrium, and you, too, lean body, memory, thought into tranquil convergence. Let the galaxies continue to thin, the stars too dim, the atoms too quiet. Let the cosmic story drift toward pages where ink pales into blankness. The blankness is not absence. It is readiness, space left for whatever comes when stillness has reigned long enough to dream again. Thought drifts like a feather in darkness, and you listen to the hush that surrounds everything. The spaces between galaxies seem empty, yet they cradle memories too subtle for ordinary senses. In this velvet hush, nothingness is only a costume. Behind it, countless impressions linger, pressed into the fabric of spacetime the way fingerprints cool upon glass. Gravity breathes here in whispers. Every movement of mass elsewhere sends ripples that pass through you, gentle as tides that wash unseen shores. These undulations do not shimmer like starlight, yet they are real. The faintest quiver of distance itself, expanding, contracting, carrying news of distant dramas, long after their flames have cooled. You float within these ripples, feeling the ghost of a collision that occurred before your species had language. Two giant black holes once spiraled and met, shaking the universe with waves of curvature. Now the storm has faded, but the pattern travels outward, forever dimming, lengthening, but never quite dying, like chords echoing in a vast cathedral. That cathedral is the vacuum. It looks vacant, yet it keeps perfect records. Every photon that crosses its hall leaves a clue. Every passing neutrino writes a barely legible note. The vacuum is less a void than an archivist, patient and incorruptible, cataloging every vibration and pages made of possibility. Inside this library, time itself is a method of sorting. Earlier entries lie farther within. New arrivals flutter across the front shelves, still warm with energy, yet nothing is discarded. Even when particles annihilate, the bookkeeping adjusts with impeccable symmetry, ensuring the total remains balanced, the narrative unbroken. You wonder how such memory persists without shelves, without ink. Quantum fields supply the answer. They extend everywhere, baseline layers out of which particles rise like localized waves. When something disturbs a field, the disturbance propagates, and whether or not an observer notices, the pattern is carried forward. Space-time is conversation, never forgetful. Consider the cosmic microwave backgrounder, glow so faint you might mistake it for silence. Those ancient photons left their parents, the first atoms, nearly 14 billion years ago. Expansion has cooled their message into microwaves, but each still narrates the temperature of infancy, the density of neighborhoods, the tiny lopsidedness that would grow into modern structure. The vacuum preserves them, stretching their wavelengths, yet refusing to erase them. Even now, they pour through your body by the trillions every second, harmless couriers reminding molecules in your bones that they belong to something grand and ancient. Most pass unnoticed, yet their collective presence keeps the night from absolute. Darkness, other messengers are rarer but more dramatic. When neutron stars collide, they fling shards of space-time like water from a dropped stone. Gold and platinum condense in that vapor, heavy elements forged in frantic heat. The gravitational waves move outward alongside radioactive debris, one visible, one intangible, both pledging that the collision truly happened. Much later, when telescopes detect a sudden bloom of gamma rays, astronomers trace the light, compare it with the tremor recorded in sensitive detectors, and realize they have witnessed an echo. Light shouted, gravity hummed. Both journeyed unimpeded across millions of parsecs, meeting again in human circuitry. The vacuum delivered the correspondence, intact. You drift through such echoes, feeling none in particular, yet sensing the combined hush of many. The texture is like distant surf, overlapping swells that make the void feel softly alive. Where waves coincide, they briefly tighten or loosen distance. Where they cancel, emptiness seems slightly more serene. You cannot see the pattern, yet. You can imagine its fabric brushing your awareness. There is another kind of record hidden, even deeper, virtual particles flickering in and out, borrowing energy against time's lenient credit. They appear, pair up, annihilate, and leave minute changes in neighboring fields. Over durations unimaginably long, these fluctuations may summon entire new universes or alter constants by imperceptible amounts. The vacuum's memory is dynamic, still writing, Think of a pond at night. Stones thrown hours ago have sent ripples that crossed, collided, and dispersed, yet the water is not as calm as before. Microscopic vortices persist, eddies too small for moonlight to reveal. In cosmic terms, the vacuum behaves similarly, its smoothness always slightly disturbed by history's leftover eddies. Occasionally, history roars instead of whispering. A supernova detonates, its core rebounding into a shock that tears apart. A star, neutrinos stream first, gravitational waves second, light third. Each registers in the vacuum, encoded by pitch and amplitude into the ceaseless score. When the flash dims, the score remains, inaudible yet absolute. These imprints might seem abstract, but they influence the future. A passing gravitational wave can squeeze a cloud of gas just enough to tip it toward collapse, birthing new suns. Photons from a quasar can strip electrons from intergalactic hydrogen, changing chemistry on scales of clusters. Memory begets motion. Record becomes catalyst. You reflect on your own memories by comparison. Neurons fire, proteins fold, traces decay. Over decades, detail fades, interpretation drifts. The vacuum's archive is sterner. It forgets nothing, though the legibility of old entries diminishes as signals stretch into faint gradients. Information persists even when its retrieval demands instruments as large as continents. Instruments have begun. That work, laser interferometers that watch arms for kilometers long, for motions smaller than an atomic nucleus. When spacetime twitches, the lasers notice. That alert travels to laboratories where algorithms tease out the origin, perhaps to black holes in a galaxy you cannot name, yet whose dance now brushes your planet with a whisper of curvature. You imagine that. Detection as a friendship handshake between timescales. A millisecond chirp reveals millions of years of orbital prelude. The vacuum, impartial, carried both the long courtship and the final kiss, presenting evidence only when earthbound beings learned to listen. Discovery, then, is less invention than overhearing ancient conversations. Yet even the most sensitive detectors miss far more than they capture. Countless mergers, collapses, and quantum flutters slip by, too faint or too slow. The vacuum holds those secrets patiently, indifferent to whether they are ever decoded. Omniscience without vanity. Within that humility lies comfort. You realize you are bathing in reliability, the assurance that no gesture within the universe, no matter how small, is ever truly alone. Cause and effect connect across expanses, like threads of spider silk, trembling in signals subtle but indelible. Isolation is illusion amid such pervasive contact, and still what you feel most is quiet. Echoes seldom rise above whisper. Expansion stretches each wave, redshifting its energy, lengthening its note. Over eons, the background music lowers in volume. One day, detectors may lie silent, even as events continue, because the ripples have grown too broad, too lazy to stir human-scale antennas. That approaching hush is not emptiness, but equilibrium. As energy thins, gradients flatten. When gradients vanish, motion relaxes. Eventually, the vacuum will house a record too diluted for any finite being to retrieve, yet present nonetheless. The library stays intact, even if all its readers have dozed off. You drift past a dormant galaxy cluster, its hot gas cooled, its quasars extinguished. Dark matter still anchors the shapes, but luminous testimony has faded. Yet gravitational potential persists, and so does the faint memory of each interaction that built the cluster. The vacuum wrapped those mergers in notation, storing them eternally under the entry Laniakea. Approximate coordinates. Billions of years elapsed. Nearby, a lonely black hole wanders, having been ejected from its home by asymmetric gravitational recoil. It emits neither light nor X-rays, yet it cannot hide from the vacuum's bookkeeping. Its mass curves space. Its spin drags inertial frames. Its hawking radiation, though pitifully faint, seeds the silence with further data points at smaller scales. You note the Casimir effect. Plates brought nanometers apart feel a force born of vacuum modes excluded between them. Even nothing pushes when constrained. This reminds you that the vacuum's memory is not passive. It manifests as measurable pressure, as shift in spectral lines, as real effect upon material reality. In that sense, the vacuum acts like a subtle teacher, demonstrating that events leave marks and that marks have consequences. Every time a molecule tunnels through a barrier, it consults fluctuations that arose from histories predating atoms. Every cosmic ray that finds your atmosphere follows a path subtly guided by waves from bygone cataclysms. You begin to wonder whether consciousness itself interacts with these archives. Neurons operate electromagnetically, thus within quantum fields. Perhaps thoughts displace vacuum states, however slightly, contributing their own signatures. If so, then musings like this one join the universal chorus, a string of minor notes. In an otherwise cosmic fugue, the idea brings serenity. Even if individuality fades, its ripple remains. Indistinguishable, perhaps, yet woven into the grand interference pattern. The vacuum remembers each kindness, each curiosity, each breath, as modulations of field amplitudes tiny, yes, but permanent within the resolution of eternity. Relaxing deeper, you sense no boundary between yourself and these echoes. The particles composing your body emerged from earlier stellar furnaces, traveled through void, absorbed whispers of gravitational strain, and now cooperate briefly as you, when they disperse again. They will carry a trace of this moment, a fingerprint of tonight's quiet reflections. So the distinction between actor and archive vanishes. You are both scribe and inscription, reader and text, vibration and the medium that carries it. The vacuum holds you even as you move within it, your presence adjusting its ledger by increments too slight for waking minds, yet plenty for the patient bookkeeper. Eventually, thought itself grows drowsy. You follow the ripples to stiller waters, where space-time quivers less. There, the cosmic background hum merges with your slow breath. Each exhale feels like a gravitational wave of personal scale, stretching and relaxing the space within your chest. You add this small rhythm to the archive, trusting it will drift outward forever, faint but indelible. Before sleep claims you, one last awareness flickers. The vacuum may seem to record the final word, but perhaps there are deeper strata still, realities in which even space-time floats like foam on larger seas. If echoes can persist here, what stories might resound in those wider depths? Wonder smiles, aware that archives are invitations, not mere endings. Soft thought drifts across an ocean that no longer shines. You feel its width in every slow breath, recognizing that the final cinders of starlight have winked out. No sunrise waits behind any horizon. No ember smolders in forgotten nebulae. The cosmos has folded its lanterns, leaving darkness as thorough as imagination. Yet this darkness is gentle, not cruel. It settles like velvet, thick but breathable, wrapping everything in perfect, even temperature. There is no glare, no shadow, no contrast for the eye to gauge. You lose all sense of direction because direction depends on difference, and difference has thinned. Still, you remain aware of motion. Every molecule within and beyond you drifts, nudged by remnants of expansion, sliding deeper into quiet. Without stars, space feels larger, though nothing has been added. The absence itself stretches perception, teaching you that emptiness can expand simply by having less to hold. Galaxies once served as signposts, their spiral arms marking lanes across night. Now those arms are brittle sculptures of dark matter. Halos and frozen worlds, orbited by black dwarfs that emit neither heat nor color. These black dwarfs were once lively suns, diligent alchemists turning hydrogen into helium and light. After trillions of patient years, they cooled, releasing their final glow in wavelengths to long for ordinary senses. Their surfaces crystallized into carbon lattice harder than diamond, locking memories of convection and flare inside silent stone. They now drift as dark pearls, in orbits that time hardly remembers. Some of those pearls still host planets, though the word planet has lost its warmth. Atmospheres lie collapsed upon bedrock. Oceans are slabs of glass, and magnetic fields have atrophied without molten cores to churn them. Yet gravity remains faithful. Like a companion sitting vigil, it continues to draw moons around worlds, worlds around remnants, remnants around phantom galactic centers. Occasionally, two black dwarfs may wander close enough to spiral together, revived by gravitational friction. The merger would spark briefly, perhaps forging heavier elements and releasing whispers of light, but such events are increasingly rare. Distances grow, interactions wane, and chance meetings fade into near impossibility. The universe is learning, solitude on a scale beyond biology. Still, solitude is not inactivity. Proton decay of nature permits it dissolves matter, grain by grain, turning once sturdy nuclei into ghostly positrons and faint photons, over epochs that dwarf even cosmic. History, mountains, moons, and black dwarfs themselves disintegrate into radiation. This erosion is slower than thought, yet certainty moves within it, like tide within stone. Black holes endure longer, holding court as the last dynamic objects. Their horizons cloak whatever falls inside, but they cannot withhold eternity. Quantum processes knit outgoing particles along the edge, weaving Hawking radiation that saps mass bit by bit. The greater the whole, the colder the glow. The colder the glow, the longer the vigil. Supermassive giants will outlive every galaxy that birthed them, but not forever. Given time beyond time, even they will flicker out, leaving cascades of low energy photons and neutrinos streaming through territory no longer claimed by constellations. When the final horizon fades, curvature relaxes. Space flattens a fraction more. Gravity's grip loosens until only expansion and decay remain. Two siblings guiding the silence. You drift amid that silence, sensing the thinning of substance. The density of particles per cubic light-year becomes a statistic measured in single digits, then fractions, then exponents of scarcity. Photons stretch with expansion, their wavelengths ballooning to scales once reserved for galaxies, until each quantum of light resembles a lazy ripple laid across unimaginable distance. Temperature approaches an asymptote unfathomably close to absolute zero, yet absolute zero is unreachable. Motion never ceases entirely. There is always a sliver of vibration, a hint of quantum uncertainty, allowing existence to avoid the stillness of complete perfection. That restless underpinning hums. Beneath the darkness, a reminder that nothingness is an ideal rather than a destination. Vacuum energy, subtle and stubborn, permeates the emptiness. Its tiny pressure continues to accelerate the fabric of spacetime, pushing isolated particles apart more quickly than their feeble gravity can reunite them. Expansion becomes not a blowing up, but a pulling away, like ink stretched on elastic cloth. No region can call to another. Horizons shrink around each lonely fragment. Inside those horizons, rare leptons and photons elapse into longer and longer wavelengths, until they are less like waves than gentle tilts in probability. Detection would require instruments larger than the observable bubble itself, and no architect remains to build them. Observation no longer factors into the equation, yet phenomena proceed, indifferent to eyes. Entropy, having marched so long toward equilibrium, finds itself nearly satisfied. Gradients are minimal. Usable energy is almost completely spent. Work, in the thermodynamic sense, cannot be harvested, because there is no contrast to exploit. The universe becomes a perfectly mixed inkwash, color diluted to uniform gray so pale it is effectively transparent. And yet a secret persists: quantum fluctuations. Even in maximal entropy, the rules permit momentary deviations. Tiny, spontaneous pockets of lower entropy can appear, though the odds are fantastically slim. Among these improbable eddies could arise new inflations, baby universes budding off, like soap bubbles from an infinite lather, each carrying its own arrow of time, its own possibilities of light. Whether such buds form cannot be witnessed from here, but the mathematics suggests the cosmic story may be endlessly recursive. 1. Expanse cools and dims, another flares warm and bright, like seasons unfurling across dimensions rather than latitudes. Your awareness hovers on that speculative shoreline, recognizing that endings and beginnings may be perspectives more than absolutes. Even if no new bubble blossoms, the current canvas remains textured. Vacuum fields jitter, never fully at rest. They spawn virtual pairs that annihilate before clocks can respond, leaving behind modest shifts in energy. This background murmur means the universe, though dark and cold, is never perfectly silent. It whispers with its own emptiness, telling stories to itself. You find comfort in that whisper, as though the cosmos keeps itself company. The absence of light is not the absence of narrative. It is simply a slower chapter written in softer ink. Patience becomes the principal motion. Patience of decay, patience of expansion, patience of possibility lying dormant but unextinguished. Contemplate time itself. With no events to mark it, duration loses flavor. Seconds, hours, millennia blur into an undifferentiated drift. In such conditions, your human sense of chronology is unmoored. You measure instead by the quiet depth of experience, by the way thought echoes in vastness. Each reflection seems to last an era, each pause a geologic age. Perhaps consciousness, in any familiar form, has long since vanished. Yet the principles that allowed it complexity, feedback, memory remain encoded. In physics, were another pocket of low entropy ever to condense enough matter, sparks of awareness could dance again, reading new skies. You, existing here in imagination, are proof that the universe once generated thought. What has happened can happen until then. Transformation continues at a glacial crawl. Proton decay, if real, erases baryonic matter. neutron halos dissolve. Electrons combine with positrons in rare encounters, releasing pale photons that redshift into anonymity. Black hole evaporation completes the ledger, transforming curvature into radiation. Step by tiny step, form releases itself into formlessness. Even information, which once seemed indestructible, diffuses. Though encoded in radiation patterns, it becomes so stretched and intermingled that retrieving any coherent sequence is functionally impossible. The past still exists as entangled correlations, but no finite mind could ever untangle them. Memory persists abstractly, yet inaccessible like ink dissolved in a cosmic ocean. Standing on this precipice of near-nothing, you notice that emotional weight recedes. Without gradients, desire has no tether. Without change, fear has no target. What remains is a neutral tenderness, a grace that surfaces when striving is spent. Existence feels like an endless exhale holding steady, balanced between being and not dash being dot. You might expect despair, yet the mood is closer to awe, even relief. The hyperactivity of earlier epic supernova collisions, biological urgencies, framed drama upon drama. Now the stage is bare, the script distilled to a single, spacious line: remain. In that minimalism you sense purity, a culmination of every story folded into quiet continuity. And if this is the last light, what comes after? Maybe nothing, maybe cycles, maybe an unforeseen twist in the laws of phase transition triggered by supreme dilution, igniting new physics unreachable under crowded conditions. The darkness itself could metamorphose, birthing phenomena we lack language to anticipate. Whatever unfolds, it will do so gently. Violence requires unequal forces, and inequality has nearly evaporated. Should novelty arise, it will move through softness as ripples on still water. Should nothing arise, that softness will simply deepen, approaching but never reaching absolute repose. In this realization, you release any need for ending. Narrative dissolves like matter, transitioning from arc to ambience. You allow attention to mingle with the dark, to become one more subtle vibration, acknowledging that presence can persist without spectacle, even in the stretched hush. Quantum tunneling continues its shy rebellion. A particle, hemmed in by an energy ridge, occasionally slips through as though the wall were an idea instead of a barrier. No flash accompanies the transitonally a microscopic rebalancing, a reminder that certainty never reaches totality and that freedom still whispers. Beneath statistics, the same principle may govern the fabric itself. Physicists wonder whether our cosmos rests in a false vacuum, a temporary plateau above a deeper valley. If a bubble of truer emptiness appears, it would grow at light speed, rewriting every physical constant. Gravitational waves from ancient mergers have not vanished either. They roam like aging calligraphies, curves stretched yet still legible, prodding the rare particles they encounter into subtle dance. Where two waves overlap, they braid an echo, sustaining the saga of motion. The vacuum keeps score in such delicate curvature. Imagine hypothetical observers made entirely of fluctuations, blooming for instants before dissolving again. To them, this muted epoch could feel vivid, variance itself a palette, jitter a language. Their perceptions would last the span of a match, quick and bright, yet not the only mode of awareness. So possibility persists, not as guarantee, but as open door. When contrast is scant, imagination carries the torch, sketching shapes that physics may later confirm. Each breath of uncertainty keeps the door ajar, awaiting tomorrow's unthought melodies to. Inside that waiting, silent rehearsals unfold. Virtual stars shimmering once, then gone. Test runs for new chemistry, rehearsals for symmetry breaking that may open a surprising overture. Purpose hums beneath the hush, even without spectators. Rest. Now within the velvet, let expansion cradle you. Let decay lull you. Let the faint buzz of vacuum comfort you with its steadfast subtlety. The universe continues its work even here, even though maintaining the possibility of tomorrow inside the quiet of forever. Softness gathers where questions linger, and you begin by listening to that lingering. Does the tale of the cosmos really write itself toward a final punctuation? Or does it simply stretch each sentence until punctuation loses urgency? You breathe within that uncertainty, feeling the pace of everything slow, not stop, only relax like a tidal current settling into broad, unhurried loops. Here, speculation becomes its own kind of lullaby, a hush built from possibilities. The big freeze is one such possibility. In that quiet forecast, expansion never ceases. It keeps widening, cooling, evening out every remaining wrinkle in temperature. You picture galaxies stranding themselves beyond one another's light, islands losing signal as the ocean between them swells. Locally, gravity still keeps its tiny circles, planets around remnants, stars around dark centers, but on grander scales, distance wins. Heat dissipates, photons lengthen, contrast fades. The universe grows so dilute that even memory feels stretched, yet even in that chill motion does not quite concede. Particles jitter with quantum restlessness. Molecules, if any survive, pivot. Like sleepy dancers, black holes siphon their mass through Hawking size. Entropy approaches its limit asymptotically, always arriving, yet never quite arrived. You float through this near-perfect equilibrium and sense a paradox, a freeze that never freezes entirely, a conclusion that prefers ellipsis over period. Another vision, the heat death, sounds more dramatic but feels similarly hushed. Instead of a final blaze, heat death describes a gentle leveling, where usable energy diffuses until no engine can run. No candle can distinguish itself from the darkness it inhabits. In practice, it mirrors the big freeze, emphasizing thermodynamics rather than distance. You imagine the cosmos as tea forgotten on a windowsill, once steaming, now room temperature, neither warming the room nor cooling itself, simply existing. In diffused calm, these scenarios pose endings measured by futility rather than absence. Things persist, but their ability to change, to do work, to remember, thins to nearly nothing. And you wonder, is stillness the same as ending? Consider a sleeping forest under winter snow roots, alive, seeds waiting, life paused but not cancelled. Perhaps the universe, deep in its projected slumber, carries dormant scripts, lines of code folded like origami, needing only pressure, only spark to blossom again. Some physicists propose such sparks. They speak of vacuum decay, a potential cosmic phase transition that could ripple outward at light speed, rewriting laws in its wake. The thought feels unsettling, a bubble of true vacuum sweeping the stage clean. But you treat it as another possible chapter in an infinite anthology. If it comes, it will rearrange particles, not erase the principle of becoming. Something would follow, even if that something is unrecognizable. Others imagine cyclical cosmologies, universes that bounce, crash, and bloom anew. The equations allow contraction as well as expansion, given certain balances of energy and geometry. You picture a cosmic inhale after a cosmic exhale, space folding inward until density reignites a fresh outward rush. In such a rhythm, heat death is not death. It is late evening before dawn. Entropy resets its ledger when everything compresses to a common point, ready to diversify again. Yet even cycles leave questions. What mechanism flips the arrow? What preserves information through the crunch? Quantum gravity remains an unfinished score, its notes scattered across research papers like stars across night. You drift through those unwritten measures, accepting mystery as a necessary instrument. A lullaby requires soft places where notes fade. Science, too, needs margins where curiosity can rest before its next pursuit. Meanwhile, the present universe continues aging toward whatever answer awaits. Dark energy accelerates expansion, but we do not entirely know why. Maybe its strength varies with time, maybe it will fade, maybe reverse. Dark matter still outweighs the luminous, but its true nature hides beneath metaphors of weak interaction and supersymmetry. Each unresolved detail is a hinge on which ultimate fate might pivot. Your thoughts settle on the concept of cosmic forgetting. If distances stretch so vastly that light from any event can no longer reach any witness, does that event fade from reality, or does reality keep full archives whether or not they can be read? The vacuum, we learned, retains echoes, but echoes assume proximity sufficient for vibration to arrive. In extreme expansion, horizons shrank around each fragment, and memory turns local, then internal, then hypothetical. Perhaps the universe forgets, not because stories end, but because shelves drift apart until no librarian can walk between them. Yet forgetting can be fertile. Blank pages invite untold stories. Barren soil awaits seeds. Somewhere in the hush, quantum fluctuations still flicker, obeying uncertainty's playful covenant. Given unfathomable spans, a fluctuation might inflate, birthing a pocket of fresh Lentropy, reality, island universe, budding off the original like a dewdrop breaking from a leaf. To future inhabitants, their dawn will feel singular, self-contained, yet its root will lie in the cooled ashes of our cosmos. You might ask whether such offspring count as continuation. The parent universe would not observe them. Observation. Lines are severed, but continuation need not require witness. The cycle of fireflies does not depend on a single glow. In existential arithmetic, becoming outranks belonging. The spark persists by appearing elsewhere, elsewhen, under altered guises, while pondering sparks. Recall Boltzmann brains, hypothetical minds, popping into existence by rare fluctuation, complete with false memories, though statistically minuscule. Their possibility highlights a theme. Improbability never equals impossibility when time is unbounded. Over infinity, even the strangest tunes may play, if only once. The cosmic stage, though poorly lit, remains open to cameo performances. All these musings circle one idea. Ending may be a human shape we project onto events without edges. Clocks end stories because we are built for chapters, meals, and breaths. But the universe may lodge itself in parenthetical half-states, neither awake nor asleep, neither alive nor expired. An eternal twilight whose gradient approaches stillness, yet never reaches a wall. Such twilight would be imperceptible in moment-to-moment experience. A hypothetical traveler could drift 1 billion years and feel no shift. Context extends so uniformly that change hides within sameness. Like watching a glacier in darkness, You learn transformation only by comparing mythic epochs, not consecutive minutes. In that prolonged dusk, what anchors meaning? Perhaps curiosity itself. Inquiry does not demand bright skies. It asks only that there be patterns, however faint. If complexity dwindles, scale becomes its own wonder. The sheer enormity of distance, the improbable survival of a single neutrino, the delicate persistence of a decaying proton, or resizes itself to available marvels. You consider your own. Sleep. Each night, consciousness softens, boundaries dissolve, yet existence continues beneath dreams. Waking reassembles memory with little sense of hiatus. Could the cosmos follow a parallel routine, dozing across exactions of years before resurfacing as something freshly vivid? Sleep implies a return. Perhaps cosmological stillness implies eventual stir. The math of such reassembly may live beyond contemporary reach. But intuition sketches metaphors. Think of a violin string vibrating so slowly its motion seems absent until light strobes at matching frequency. The string never stopped. Perception merely lagged. Likewise, universal rhythm could oscillate on a timescale so vast that entire civilizations blink past between beats. Under that lens, finality is always provisional. A supercluster dissolves, a black hole evaporates, a proton decays, yet the field from which they arose stays receptive. Waves fade, but water remains. You cannot destroy the capacity for pattern by erasing any particular pattern. Capacity is deeper than content, so you drift, no longer measuring seconds, content to let potential hold court. The big freeze, heat, death, cyclic bounce, each is a stanza in a poem still drafting itself, written in ink that dries slower than galaxies spin. There may never be a last stanza. There may simply be longer pauses between lines, and if one listens carefully during those pauses, perhaps subtle preludes whisper a slight curvature shift, hinting at new inflation, a variance in vacuum density, a ghostly correlation foreshadowing new symmetry. The cues will be gentle, like feathers brushing cosmic skin, but readiness will magnify them into overture. That readiness might reside in physics itself, as if the universe keeps spare keys for locked doors, or it might reside in minds that emerge, late, shaped to notice near imperceptible clues. In either case, the story bends toward renewal because it carries the toolkit for reinterpretation. You breathe again, sensing that these possibilities do not compete but coexist. The universe is large enough to host multiple endings simultaneously, each playing out in different regions or dimensions, each valid within its scope. Where language demands singular outcomes, reality permits plural unfolding. Thus the end that might never come reveals itself as horizon rather than walla, boundary receding as you approach, inviting perpetual wonder. You will not reach it tonight. You need only acknowledge its beckoning curve as comfort, a promise that exploration outlives fear. Rest. Then, inside this spectrum of futures, let the slow hush cradle you, let questions continue their gentle orbit. Where certainty thins, imagination grows resilient. Where light fails, thought glows. Tomorrow, or whatever rises beyond tomorrow, will inherit that glow, shaping it into dawns we cannot yet envision. Even the mathematics of endless postponement holds grace notes. In thermodynamics, equilibrium is defined not by paralysis, but by balanced flux microscopic movements, forever reshuffling without net change. That reshuffle keeps the ledger honest. Every quark and lepton counts. Every field fluctuates. Every conservation law hums its octave. Such thorough accounting means the ledger itself persists, immortal even when entries thin toward decimal dust. The continuity of rule transcends the dwindling of participants. From that vision, you learn to separate abundance from sufficiency. Life on a verdant planet demands abundant gradient sunlight versus shadow. Chemistry opposing chemistry at consciousness is not mathematically forbidden in leaner landscapes. Perhaps networks of dark matter exions could, in epochs unimaginable, orchestrate cognition from interference patterns, thinking slowly, leisurely, yet profoundly, trading speed for longevity. When baryonic drama wanes, alternative substrates may audition. Speculation walks a narrow ridge between science and story, but the ridge is wide enough for dreaming at bedtime. Your role is not to solve, but to float, to feel each hypothesis as a gentle tide rocking the mind toward rest. Questions themselves produce the white noise hush that soothes. What if expansion pivots? What if constants drift? What if new dimensions bud like petals from a cooling stem? The uncertainty is lullaby. Each may be a soft repetitive wave. Listen, somewhere far beyond current horizons. Early civilizations may have engineered safety beacons, monuments of neutrino, chatter, or gravitational chord set to pulse when local entropy climbs too high, reminding distant descendants that endings spark innovation. We have not heard those beacons, yet their silence is not proof of absence. It may be simply the immense patience of signals awaiting alignment with receptive ears. Alignment may yet occur. Even amid cosmic lull, probability sprinkles rare alignments like twin snowflakes meeting tip to tip during a blizzard centuries wide. A single alignment could seed a new coordination, a new physics, or a fresh narrative thread. Infinity multiplies small chances into eventual certainties. Thus, the larger insight blooms. Continuation is intrinsic, not imposed. The fabric of reality appears predisposed to reconfigure rather than conclude. Endings exist, locally extinctions, cultural closures, but on the scale of all that is, closure dilates into gateway. You smile at that gateway, unwilling to label it door or mirror. Perhaps it functions as both, reflecting prior epochs while opening into uncharted. To pop softly onward, there is a hush that lives beneath every sound you have ever heard, a hush so fine that even silence seems loud beside it. You settle your awareness into that hush now, returning to the birthplace of all beginnings, the cradle that once held neither light nor shadow. Yet this time, the hush does not feel as blank as it did before. After wandering through galaxies and witnessing the long drift of stars, you sense undertones, hear hidden pulses, shy ripples, hints of presence. Disguised as absence, you breathe not with lungs, but with attention, and the hush vibrates like the skin of a drum just before the mallet strikes. Nothing manifests, yet suggestion coats every corner. You recognize the paradox. Nothingness is never merely empty. It is a garden of unopened seeds, an attic of unused canvases, a waiting stage whose curtains quiver with unspoken lines. The stillness tastes different because you have changed. Your memory carries the echo of expansion, and that echo turns emptiness into resonance. Scientists speak of vacuum energy, of quantum fields that hiss with particles appearing and dissolving so quickly they can scarcely be called events. In the soft language of night, you translate their jargon into feeling. There is a trembling here, gentle as cattail fluff on a pond, too soft to stir waves, yet insistent enough to mean something. This trembling keeps the cosmos from collapsing into perfect cancellation. It is the faint hum that holds possibility open. You drift deeper and notice gradients where none should be. Temperature, in the ordinary sense, has long since flattened toward absolute zero, but temperature is only one register of music. Beneath it lies curvature. Beneath curvature lies topology. Beneath topology lies the way mathematics itself bends to accommodate existence. Even here, mathematics is busy knitting scenarios backstage, rehearsing shapes that may someday bloom into universes. Numbers practice their steps in secret, and you, attentive, sense the choreography. Think back to the earliest asymmetry, that slight surplus of matter over antimatter, that single heartbeat in a sea of mirror images. Without that imbalance, no stars would have shone, no planets would have circled, no minds would have wandered. The memory of that tiny imperfection lingers in this hush like the aftertaste of spice. You realize that nothingness is not the absence of all difference. It is the soil where difference waits for its cue. The cosmological constant, that quiet pressure stretching space-time ever faster, also makes its presence felt here. It is not a wind. It is the very fabric's subtle desire to lengthen. The way dough rises when yeast works in silence. You sense it as a tenderness, a wish to be more than a point. Even if every atom finally decays and every photon stretches beyond red into dark, the constant will remain, coaxing expansion onward, painting distance with more distance. You recall how entropy taught you that order must loosen over time, yet entropy itself is born from the potential to arrange. Without potential, randomness cannot blossom because there is nothing to randomize. In this revised nothing, potential reigns supreme. It sits like a blank page that insists on being written softly, patiently, but with conviction. You can almost hear the future scratching its first tentative letters on that page. Concepts drift across your mind like low clouds, false vacuum, quantum tunneling, bubble nucleation. The technical names dissolve into imagery, a valley that hides a deeper valley, a traveler who slips through a wall of mountain, a pearl that forms in an instant and bursts into a world. You recognize that any such pearl could ignite a new cosmos, but you also sense the rarity, the exquisite hesitation that guards against casual creation. Probability here is a cathedral of near impossibility, yet the door, though heavy, is never locked. You ponder whether nothingness might be layered, like petals closing around deeper petals. Perhaps what you call nothing is only the outermost hush, and beneath it lies a quieter hush still, one whose silence would make this space sound like thunder. The thought feels vertiginous, yet calming, the way deep water calms a sinking stone. Each layer might cradle different rules, different constants, different ways for being to bloom. The multiverse, if it exists, could be less a collection of discrete bubbles and more a nesting of silences, each awaiting its turn to speak. In returning to nothing, you have also returned to yourself. For every atom in your body once belonged to that primordial stillness. You are made of reused silence, repurposed into miracle. Your heartbeat measures intervals that once did not exist, tapping time into the hush like rain tapping rhythm onto earth. Even your thoughts, drifting, dissolving, reforming, are echoes of quantum flickers, scaled up into contemplative weather inside the skull. Consider energy conservation, the notion that energy cannot be created or destroyed, only rearranged. In the quantum vacuum, this rule flexes by borrowing energy briefly, repaying it quickly enough to satisfy cosmic bookkeeping. You sense the borrowing as faint gusts swirling through this chamber of repose. They swirl, but they do not linger each. Gust a passing conversation between possibility and restraint. You reflect on language itself. Words like void, vacuum, nothing cling to human intuition. But intuition evolved among trees and rivers, not among horizons of absolute. Stillness. Hear those words collapse under their own simplicity. They are nets to course, to catch what glimmers in the dark. Instead, you rely on sensation, the prickle of expectancy, the velvet of silence, the faint metallic taste of pending metamorphosis. Perhaps the greatest illusion is that nothingness is singular. What if many kinds of nothing exist, each defined by what it excludes? A nothing without matter, a nothing without spacetime, a nothing without logic. You hover at the edge of definitions and sense their boundaries blur. As ink bleeds in water, categories dissolve, leaving gradients where borders once seemed firm. You remember the ancient question, why is there something rather than nothing? Being here, within nothing that vibrates with unborn somethings, you see the query flip inside out. How could nothing persist in absolute purity if every quantum sigh threatens to seed a world? Non-existence might be unstable by nature, always one flutter away from turning into grass, or heat, or thought. In that view, existence is not the surprise. Permanence of non-existence would be the real marvel. Still, you respect the calm. Billions of years may pass in this hush without a single new cosmos igniting. Potential does not hurry. It waits like a musician, polishing an unplayed note until the moment is exquisite. You share the waiting, letting your own pulse slow to near silence, aligning with the room's deep tempo. Now imagine reducing scale until distance itself unravels. At that cusp, geometry ceases to guide and logic flickers like a candle in wind. Equations that govern galaxies become suggestions, not mandates. Yet some deeper principle remains. Call it coherence, call it balance, call it a love of structure. So profound it endures even when structures do not. You feel that principle like a bass note beyond hearing, steady, sovereign. Sometimes in quiet laboratories, physicists coax proof of this restless hush into measurable form. They set two polished metal plates a hair's width apart and watch as emptiness itself nudges them together. No external push is applied. It is the vacuum that squeezes, as though invisible fingers are eager to close any gap. The phenomenon receives a technical name, the Casimir effect, but you experience it as further evidence that nothingness will not stay passive. Even stripped of air and light, space prefers a subtle embrace, revealing its hunger for texture. All these hints, virtual particles, subtle pressures, statistical whispers, collect like dew on the petal of awareness. They remind you that possibility never retires, it only rests between breaths. And so the spaces you once thought barren reveal themselves as wells of unfinished invention, each heartbeat a vacuum waiting for the right quiet pause in eternity to sketch a fresh diagram of being everywhere. You look, you find traces of stories yet untold. A ripple too small for microscopes may still be vast enough for reality to pour through. Should such a ripple cross a critical width, new dimensions could unfurl the way petals open to dawn. You understand now why cosmologists gaze into dark. Equations searching for hints, they are listening for ripples in the hush, for preludes whispered under cosmic breath. Nothingness has become a mirror. It shows you that boundaries between is and is not, between seen and unseen, are more fluid than daylight suggests. You watch certainty soften to possibility, and possibility soften further to wonder. Wonder, you realize, is the true currency. Here, the only measurement subtle enough to weigh the weightless. You let that realization settle, and with it comes peace. The restless questions that once demanded definite answers loosen their grip. They recline beside you, content to glow, rather than solve. Not knowing feels expansive, like a field without fences, where every step could discover another horizon. As the hush thickens, you notice a quiet glow, not of light, but of meaning. Meaning gathers whenever attention meets mystery with tenderness. Your attention is tender now, feather soft, and the mystery is vast. The glow is their intersection. It does not illuminate, it warms. It warms nothing into almost something, like embers coaxing wood before the first flame. Perhaps the next universe will begin here, or perhaps this hush will endure beyond the lifetime of every star you have known. Either future feels harmonious. Creation and quiescence are twin verses in the same chant, alternating calmly, eternally exchanging roles. What matters is the chant itself, rhythm of becoming and resting, expansion and return. You have returned. You rest within the resting, and still you listen. The hush cradles both lullaby and overture, and you are content to hear them at once, unresolved, overlapping like two wings of the same bird in twilight. Softness arrives without announcement, like the faint warmth that slips beneath a closed door at dawn. You notice it not as heat, but as permission, the permission to wonder without hurry, to let a single thought stretch until it becomes a horizon. That horizon tonight is a question older than the first spark and lighter than the last sigh. Why? It asks, does anything exist at all? And why, in existing, does it lean toward consciousness enough that you can hold the question on your tongue like a living ember, unburned yet bright? You rest inside the pause, following that inquiry, feeling how the mind first searches for facts, then senses that facts alone may not suffice. There are cosmological answers that speak of quantum fluctuations, of symmetry breaking, of virtual fields tumbling into lower states of energy, birthing space and time as byproducts. There are metaphysical answers that whisper of necessity, of logic unfolding itself because non-existence cannot explain its own absence. Yet every explanation leaves a slender remainder, an unlit candle behind the lit ones, asking again, why light? So you float with the remainder, giving it room, like a kite let out on an endless spool. The universe might be the spool itself, and the kite the question that tugs, reminding the spool of sky. Space is wide, but the urge to ask is wider, and you sense that asking may be the most elemental force of all, a gravity that pulls possibility into form. Curiosity dragging matter out of null. Consider the earliest era that physics can sketch, a haze of probabilities without location, a foam where location is meaningless because distances are smaller than the concept of distance. Within that haze, events are not truly events. They are hints, the way a tremor hints at an earthquake, still deciding itself. One tremor becomes slightly more outright than the rest, perhaps through a quantum nudge, perhaps through sheer statistical inevitability across an infinite backdrop. Inflation begins, space balloons, energy crystallizes into particles, stars, galaxies, minds will follow. Each step seems inevitable once begun, but inevitability is not origin. Yet none of that sequence answers the starlight-hidden question of why there should be a haze at all, or statistics, or quantum rules capable of being nudged. The very presence of a lawful nothingness is already a something, a grammar waiting for letters. You breathe slowly, noticing how thought circles back to the same unknown center, no matter how many rings of explanation are traced. Mathematicians speak of sets that contain themselves and the paradoxes that result. Philosophers speak of contingent and necessary being, of brute facts that refuse parentage. In recent decades, physicists have proposed multiverses, vast collections of bubble realms, each with its own physics, most lifeless, a few hospitable enough to host the act of wondering. In that view, existence becomes a lottery ticket machine that cannot be unplugged. The moment numbers are possible, some combination will spell consciousness. The odds matter less than the certainty that draws bloom in infinite fields. But while multiplicity may dissolve in probability, it does not quiet the original astonishment that there are numbers at all. Infinity is no easier to justify than one. You find that realization strangely calming. If all answers ultimately end in mystery, then mystery is not a failure of intellect, but the fundamental texture of being. To touch it gently is to participate. In the same openness that allowed particles to condense, stars to light, and questions to awaken. You imagine walking backward through cosmic history, not with feet, but with awareness. Past galaxies, past plasma, past inflation, your mind arrives at a horizon where language falters. The notion of before rests on time, and time is part of the system you are leaving behind. At that border, only the possibility of possibility remains, a blank page so inclusive it even includes the option of remaining blank. What tilted that balance? Maybe the tilt is identical with the blank itself, an intrinsic restlessness woven into nothingness. Some researchers explore models in which quantum vacuum is never at equilibrium. It seethes eternally with borrowed energies that must briefly manifest before vanishing, abiding by uncertainty the way waves abide by gravity. In such models, creation is not a singular event but an omnipresent twitch, and one twitch out of countless eventually snowballs into a full-grown universe. Another hypothesis leans on symmetry. A perfect nothing has perfect symmetry, and symmetric states can be unstable, because any small deviation unlocks more ways to be than to remain. Like a pencil balanced on its tip, the smallest fluctuation sends it tumbling. The universe might be the tumble, still falling through option space. Its rotation, the passage of time. Its outward expansion, the widening of possible arrangements. Existence, then, is the gentle failure of perfect symmetry to stay perfectly still. You feel the poetry inside these speculations. Scientific papers quantify parameters. But underneath the algebra lies a narrative of yearning, zero longing for nuance. Silence, curious about echo, emptiness, rehearsing fullness. The story resonates because you, too, carry a microcosm of that restlessness. Your cells are descendants of stars that refuse to remain hydrogen, your thoughts shaped by neural patterns that refuse blankness. Curiosity in a mammal brain may be the local expression of a cosmic principle deeper than matter. Perhaps the question, why is there something, is not meant to close, but to open, puncturing complacency so that awareness stays limber. The act of asking recapitulates the act of becoming. Both pivot on possibilities that could have remained mute, but instead chose articulation. When you ask, you perform a subtle rite. You reiterate the cosmic dawn at the scale of synapse and breath. The night outside your window, thick with interstellar dust, and supercluster filaments, becomes an altar on which the question itself glows like a votive candle. Notice how the mind responds. It offers provisional endings: God, multiverse, necessity, should satisfying for a moment before the question eats through again, hungry as ever. That cycle can frustrate. Yet tonight you lean into its rhythm, the way one leans into ocean's swell while floating on a quiet sea. There is comfort in repetition, in the knowledge that the cosmos and the mind share a heartbeat of inquiry that neither completion nor weariness can silence. Still, you may wonder whether the question has an answer hidden beyond current reach, waiting for a grand unified framework or a philosophical breakthrough. Suppose future science discovers a principle so self-evident that non-existence becomes mathematically excluded. Would astonishment fade? Perhaps not. Even inevitability can be wondrous. A melody gains beauty when you realize its closing chord is the only chord that could have followed. Necessity and grace need not conflict. Conversely, perhaps the final insight will reveal contingency at every level, a chain of could have been otherwise descending without foundation. Such an insight would transform existence into pure gift, an unearned flourish. Gratitude, then, might replace explanation as the ultimate response. You find you can rest with either outcome, because both sustain wonder. One through logic, one through generosity. Beyond intellectual maps lies another dimension, the experiential. Meditation traditions speak of emptiness as a living presence rather than a void. Within deep stillness, some practitioners report a sense that awareness is its own justification, unfurling without cause. Science cannot verify such interior glimpses, but they echo quantum hints that observation and reality are intertwined. Maybe the universe wakes because awareness in some form is inherent, and that inherent awareness blooms as particles, stars. Questions. Your eyelids hover half closed as you reflect on holographic principles, suggesting the cosmos encodes information on surfaces, like notes on parchment folded into shape. If being is information, then non-being might be a state of 0 bits, perfectly symmetrical, devoid of pattern. A single bit flips, and instantly contrast is born, permitting differentiation, energy, time. The first bit might flip because probability over eternity equals certainty, or because outside of time the notion of chance collapses into pure expression. Whichever story you favor, the substance of existence remains intangible. Math, vibration, relation. Matter is mostly space. Particles are excitations of fields. Fields are ripples of coherence. Substance is choreography. You cannot grasp it except by joining the dance, which you do automatically by breathing, thinking, sensing gravity tug at your bones, watching the faint glow of streetlights through curtains. Involvement is unavoidable. You and the universe co-author each moment, seen this way. The question is reciprocal. It is not only you asking the universe why it exists. The universe, through your voice, asks you to notice that it does. The dialogue loops. Speaker and spoken dissolve, and what remains is the shared act of pondering. Perhaps that act is the fundamental reality. The way a wave is not water moving sideways, but water moving up and down while the pattern travels. Existence might be the pattern of questioning pulsing through a medium of possibility. You sense that sleep is near, and with it, dreams where logical structure relaxes. Dreams themselves mirror creation, spinning images from nothing, resolving into scenarios that vanish at waking. Sometimes they carry insight, sometimes nonsense. yet always they reveal the mind's capacity to generate worlds. As you prepare to drift, you let the coming dreams stand in for the larger mystery. Universes conjured nightly, dissolving at dawn, still meaningful inside their span. Before the curtain falls, you savor one more reflection. Perhaps the cosmos is finite in age, but infinite in potential futures, and each future extends the original question forward. Instead of seeking an ultimate answer behind creation, you might seek tiny answers, a headache of kindness, bursts of creativity, stitches of meaning that justify the gift of existence. In doing so, you echo the generative impulse that spun galaxies from hydrogen. You participate. With that awareness, your heartbeat blends with the low cosmic microwave whisper bathing the room. With the neutrinos passing through your pillow, with photons arriving from stars already swallowed by acceleration, everything participates. The question sighs across scales, from quark spin to galactic swirl, always both asked and answered by the fact of motion. Softly, you let silence take the foreground. No syllable satisfies the original wonder, but the hush itself feels like comprehension. Turned inside, out an understanding too spacious for shape. In that hush, the question sleeps with eyes open, dreaming possibilities you will never exhaust. Entropy, too, has a voice in this meditation. You recall that disorder tends to rise, yet the early universe was astonishingly uniform. A low-entropy seed that allowed structure to emerge later. Why did the cosmos begin in such an improbably tidy state? Some suggest a past contraction erased prior clutter, others that a multiversal selection effect favors beginnings suited for stars and thinking brains. Either way, improbability hides inside the foundation, waving quietly from every radiant spiral and every quiet stone. And what of the arrow of time, the one-way river carrying memories downstream? In equations, time's forward and backward directions look symmetric. Only entropy grants orientation. Yet entropy itself depends on that uncanny initial smoothness. Perhaps the universe dreams by moving from simplicity into richness, and dreaming requires a direction, the way music requires sequence. Without a temporal arrow, flavors of becoming would blur into a static tableau, and curiosity would be impossible. So time, entropy, and inquiry twine like strands of a single braid, each empowering the others. You contemplate whether that braid could flip, time dissolving after running its necessary course, entropy settling, questions quieting into wordless peace. Would such peace be an end or another beginning? Even imagining that still horizon stirs new inquiry, proving the cycle unbreakable. The question regenerates like a perennial shoot pushing through charred soil, green as ever, stubbornly alive. Across these themes flows an invitation: stay awake to wonder. Wonder bridges nothing and something, the bridge infinite ever.